Okay, so we're going to get started. This is a great topic, and it's something that I've never presented on before, and it's also not on BCG. So if you've ever, and it's new content, so I'm presenting it here first. I will start the webinar and go over the presentation, and then after the presentation, we'll open up for questions. And since it's a live webinar, you can ask pretty much questions about anything that you want related to your career or related to the webinar. And usually the questions are a lot of fun. People have great questions. And that's actually my favorite part of the week, talking about questions and reviewing them. And so we will get started. So one of the things that I've noticed at BCG, and it's actually getting a lot worse. It used to be if somebody was going out on a law firm interview, probably 50% of the time they would end up getting an offer. And over the past several years, those numbers have increasingly gone down, both at BCG and other companies we have, such as like Law Crossing, which is a job consolidator where people sign up to look at jobs that aren't on other job sites, essentially. And so theirs have gone down as well. It's either that legal employers are getting more competitive to get jobs at, or that people are starting to make a lot of interview mistakes. And a lot of these mistakes actually started when, when the economy was much better for people getting jobs around the time when COVID and law firms started getting a lot of relief money and that sort of thing. So I think people got more arrogant about being able to get positions. And so now those numbers are going down, and they're going down a lot. So legal employers are interviewing more people. They're seeing more things in your background that are mistakes when you're interviewing, and they're less likely to hire a lot of people because of things that they're doing in interviews. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. This is all new content that's been created in anticipation of this webinar. I think it'll be a really good webinar. There are a lot of people, though, even today, that are able to go and get every job that they interview for, and others who seem to consistently not get jobs after interviews. And when I say people get every job that they interview for, there literally are people that I've seen that will get 5 interviews or whatever the number is, and they'll actually get every single job that they interview for. And it could be extremely competitive, difficult to get firms to get jobs at. And it could also be easier ones, but there literally are people do it. And what I'm going to talk about today are the things that they do that makes it much easier for them to makes them get jobs. And they're things that you need to understand. So here are the most major mistakes that people make. These are ones that almost everyone makes a few of them, but these mistakes are things that people that get jobs simply don't do. If you go into an interview and the first one is saying something negative about your former or current employer, the odds are that wherever you're interviewing, the organization, the law firm is going to believe that the situation in your former employer, your current employer was not great. And that's okay. People leave jobs all the time to go to better places. Partners leave jobs, associates leave jobs, everybody. It's not a big deal if you're leaving a job. But when you start saying something negative about your former employer, this makes you look angry, bitter, and like someone who just couldn't get along in that environment. And the interviewer is going to wonder if you'll have the same problems again if they hire you. One of the funniest things I ever see is when people are leaving huge firms, and they'll be leaving a firm like an awesome firm like Melviny or some firm that's been around for 150 years or something, and we'll say, oh, everything's going downhill at that firm, no one's happy. And obviously a firm that's been around for 150 years or 100 years, or is like one of the 10 largest, most successful firms in the country, when people start saying things like that, they look crazy. But they actually go into interviews and they'll say something along the lines of, everyone's leaving Skadden Arps and is unhappy, which is impossible because the firm is very powerful and doing well. If you say things negative about your employer, most people that do that, if you ask them about the job prior to that, they'll say negative things. If you ask them about the job prior to that, they'll say negative things. So if you start saying negative things about your employer, the interviewer is going to wonder if you're going to have the same problems again if they hire you. And also, if you are saying negative things about your employer, you'll probably be saying negative things about your coworkers. You'll probably be saying negative things about clients. And that's just not a state of mind you want to be in. It makes you look disloyal. If somebody's been paying you money and you've been getting paid by them for a long period of time, a year, 6 months, you should be loyal to them. That's why people break up into groups and tribes. So if you're part of a employer, that's a group and tribe. There's nothing wrong with leaving that tribe. But if you start looking disloyal, then the interviewer is going to know you're probably going to do the same thing to them. No employer is perfect, and they certainly don't want to see people walking around saying negative things about them in the future as well. And so there's a lot of ways you can answer that while you're leaving or left the job without trashing the employer. People, by the way, can be in all sorts of circumstances in employers that aren't ideal. You could be in a bad practice group where there's problems. You could have only one person you're working with that's a tyrant. All these things happen, and I've seen them happen to tons of people. But when you say you're leaving, there's good reasons and there's bad reasons. So some of the reasons that don't necessarily trash the employer, but could be considered positive would be something like you want a more team-oriented environment, or the commute to work is too long. It's just too far of a commute. You live on another side of town. It takes you an hour and a half. This next employer is within 20 minutes of your house. It will give you more time to work and bill hours. Maybe you can say you want more responsibility. If you're an associate in litigation, maybe you want to get the opportunity to take depositions or write important motions and be the author of them, or go to court. Who knows? If you're a corporate attorney, maybe you want to run your own deals or have more responsibility or work with smaller clients. You can say all sorts of things like that aren't trashing your employer. Or you've always wanted to work for the law firm you're interviewing with. You tell them why the law firm is very special to you and why it's someplace that you wanted to work in law school. You want to work now. There's things you like about it. That's good too. You can say there's no room for advancement at your existing law firm. That means you just can't possibly get ahead. There's no one has been made partner in the 20 years the office has been open, or those sorts of things. Or you want to work at a larger law firm. That's another one. So if you may want to work at a larger law firm, that's also very important. If you're at a smaller law firm, many times it's going to determine the type of cases or the type of clients you have. So a smaller law firm will have something in the neighborhood of maybe working for small to mid-sized clients where you're not working on important matters. And so if you work at a larger firm, that's going to be very helpful for you as well, because you'll get to work on larger matters. Those will pay more money. You'll get exposed to better things. Or you may say you want to work at a smaller firm where you can have more responsibility and it's easier to bring in clients. Or you say that the law firm is going in a direction, that the new law firm is going in a direction that's very exciting to you. And that's always a good thing. So if the law firm is doing great things in your practice area or gotten these great deals or publicity, that's good. Or you say you've heard other good things about the law firm from other employees. So those are all very positive things. So you take the reason you're leaving, if they're asking you, or you need to imply it, and you need to say good things about the employer instead. And I will tell you how important it is to law firms. So I've worked with tens of thousands of attorneys, me personally, and then members of our staff that have worked with them in law firms. And what a law firm does, they always call or email, and they say almost always, not always, but if a law firm it was very hard to get people to work there and it's paying $40,000 a year or something, they won't necessarily ask that if it's hard for them to get people. But most law firms that are halfway desirable to get a position in will always ask why they want to leave. Why are they interested? What is going on? Because they don't want to hear that you're losing your job. They don't want to hear that you don't like the people. They don't want to hear that all sorts of negative things. They want to basically believe that you like them, or that there's something that they offer that you aren't getting at your current employer. And I really want to stress this because this is so important, how it's really important. So what happens is most candidates, not all, but most candidates that get a position, and this is very important, you should write it down, you should remember it, you should think about it with every interview you go into. Every time you go into a firm, you need to portray it, and you're going into interview there as upward mobility, meaning I want to go to the smaller firm that pays less because I want more responsibility. I want better opportunities to make partner. I want the ability to generate business where it's impossible at this big firm. Or if you're going to a big firm, I've always dreamed of being in a firm. This is my dream job. This is whatever it is, it needs to look like you're moving up. And this is so important because the majority of people that get offers from every employer do that. So I just want to be really clear how important this is. If you portray yourself as moving up, no matter what the firm is, no matter what the job is, then you're going to be in very good shape. So you need to figure it out. You're practicing commercial litigation at a huge firm and you want to go do personal injury law. You want to help people. It's exciting to do this. It's everyone that does this does very well. But you have to portray every single employer that you go into, you need to think that they're a better option for you than whatever you're doing now. And it's very important. Some of the worst interviews that I have ever had personally have been where I've gone into a small law firm and basically wanted to interview or get a job with a big law firm. And they ask me where I'm interviewing, and I tell them other big firms and I give no effective explanation for why I want to work there and why it's a move up. And that's it. I remember, I'll never forget this. It was, there were these firms that came to my law school in the first year to interview for first years to work as summer associates. I don't know if that still goes on, but they would interview. And some of the firms would be giant firms and some of them would be smaller firms. And I'll just never forget this guy that he got offers from probably the top 8 of 10 AmLaw 100 law firms, but he just an incredible guy. But he went in an interview. There was a small firm from South Carolina of 5 or 6 attorneys. And I was sitting outside the interview room because I was interviewing with them next. They were just interviewing people to be first year summer associates. And he gave the most incredible performance I have ever seen. He talked about how he wanted to live in a small town. He wanted to practice law like it's meant to be practiced and all this stuff to make it look like he was moving up. It was absolutely incredible, even though he ended up being a summer associate in some crazy firm like Wachtell or something. But the way he did it was incredible. So you need to portray yourself as moving up. And I don't want to spend too much time on this, but don't say bad things about your current employer. Portray yourself as moving up. The other thing that people do that I really don't like is, and it's actually very common, and people do this all the time. Law firms will not large law firms, but most law firms will also call and say, what are their salary expectations? Like, how much do they want to make? And law firms don't like it when it's brought up early in the interviews. Sometimes you'll go and do an interview and you'll have no idea. You'll have no idea what the employer pays. But you'll get the interview, and the law firm could be small, it could be large size firm, it could be in the Midwest, it could be on a coast. You just don't know. So you get into the interview and you start talking about salaries. And the employer's purpose in interviewing you is to see if you can do the job and fit in with the employer. So that's the main purpose. But when you bring up salary and benefits, you're actually at the point where you're presuming you already have a job. Now, sometimes the law firms will ask you, how much do you want to make? Or they'll say, what are your salary expectations? And the correct answer to that is, I would like to be paid fairly according to what other people are making at your firm in a comparable firm, something like that. And they'll say, what do you think that is? And you'll say, I don't know what people are being paid at your firm. I'm assuming this is something we would talk about if things move forward. So you don't let them bring it up. When you bring it up early in the discussion, you automatically disqualify yourself from a lot of jobs. It's negotiable, by the way. Almost every salary is negotiable, but you sure as heck don't want to bring it up before you bonded with everyone and they like you and you know how things are going to work. It's a huge mistake. Why would you possibly want to bring it up right away? It's crazy, because you're just disqualifying yourself for jobs. I see people all the time that are in certain markets and literally they're unemployed and not working, and they get an interview. I see this literally every day because I look at candidates and I follow up with people in BCG that don't have jobs, and I review their resume and their practice settings and stuff every day to make sure I'm doing the best I can. And our staff does the same thing because it's urgent that they get a position because they're unemployed, or some of them are about to get unemployed. And then they get an interview, and the firm says, instead of paying $250,000 a year, they pay 200, and the person's not working. And they say, no, I want to make this amount. And so it might be the only interview they get for weeks or longer, and yet they stay unemployed. I don't understand the logic of this. So you need to go in and not talk about salary. You need to get a job first, and you need to not worry about it when you go into interviews. That is crazy. Like, the other thing I want to bring up too, just so everyone understands. Now, if you are a partner level attorney, then you have a lot more negotiation room, especially if you have business. But if you're an associate, you typically don't. So if you're an associate between 1 and 4 or 5 years of experience, any job you get is just a learning experience. You're getting paid essentially to learn on the job. And so you should not, and people don't believe this, but you should not be overly concerned with your salary early in your career. Now, if you're a 5th year or 6th year, then your concern is becoming a partner. And again, if you can become a partner and make a lot more money, then salary might not be the most important thing to you. But focusing on salary early in your career is very risky, because if you're getting paid a high salary, the odds of you making partner or advancing are very slim. You're going to be working on large clients. In order to succeed at that firm, you're going to need to bring in huge clients, which is almost impossible for an associate. So there's a lot of problems with talking about salary that early in your career. Now you can bring it up when you're negotiating after you get an offer, or you can say, this is what I'd like. And if you can get a job at a comparable firm paying more, then you can, but that's fine. But you have to, if you bring up salary and benefits early in the interview, you're taking control. And the employer wants to feel in control. They want to feel like they're important, like you want to work there, like they've got a good job, like it's moving up, all these sorts of things. But if you seize control and say, I'm worth more than you're paying, then that's not good. That's going to hurt you. And I've seen people say that this is what the job pays. I'm making much more than that right now. Or when they hear the salary, their face just immediately goes down and they're not excited anymore. And if the interviewer is still trying to figure out if you're right for the job, if you have the experience, if you like them, if it's moving up, then bringing up your salary at this point is not a good idea. And if the interviewer really likes you, they'll ask how much you're currently making or made in your last job. And you can certainly tell them that if you want. You can say, this is what I'm making, or this is what I made. And many times they will, but I say I'm not wedded to that number. I'm just trying to find the best place to work at the moment. But a lot of times if the employer likes you, they will pay the same amount. Because they figure that they would rather work with someone they like and pay them a good amount, or someone that's competent, than be cheaper than other people. So your goal in the interview is really to make people like you and want to hire you. That's it. So if you get the employer to like you and want to hire you, then you're much more likely to get a good salary. If you start talking about money early on, you literally will put the brakes on. And I see this every day. I see people that are trying to get a job, and they've applied to a lot of places, and they might be in a very slow practice area. For example, corporate's very slow right now. And in some, like corporate securities is very slow. So if someone gets a corporate securities job when everyone else is losing their job, they probably should do whatever they can to get that, so they don't have a period of unemployment on their resume. But you just can't talk about money early on. You need to be very careful with that. And you need to try to get the offer first and then deflect the conversation until later. That's what you do. You don't turn sour on the job before. You need to get the job, because once you have a job, you're in much better shape. You can go into other interviews with confidence. There's so many benefits to making sure that you're not talking about money early on, because again, it turns off. So many people will not go on an interview even if they've lost their job or are losing their job, if the salary's not right, it's crazy. So you need to get a job. You need to get the job first. So a lot of times people will ask questions that show they might be problematic or they might not be fully committed. And this is just ridiculous. Here are some of the questions that people ask that get them disqualified immediately from jobs during interviews. They'll ask things like overtime is meaning, do people stay after 5? Do people stay after 7? How late do people work? I have to get home at a certain time. If the employer thinks you're a clock watcher and not working extra hours is something you don't want to do, and they're going to feel uncomfortable giving you work later in the evening and so forth, or if that's expected at that firm, that's an immediate disqualification. No interviewer wants to hear this. Now, you're entitled to not want to work long hours or stay at the office later or not take calls on the weekends. Those things are all fine. But if you ask that in an interview, then you're going to disqualify yourself because the law firm is going to hire someone that doesn't do that. They're going to choose between someone that doesn't like working long hours and someone that does. If you were an employer, what would you do if that was a requirement? You would immediately not take that person off your list. Of course you would, because you're comparing two people or to you, or one person to you, one person that's gung-ho to work long hours and doesn't bring it up, and another person that does. And then a lot of people will want to bill extra hours. They can make extra money. And a lot of these people are very inefficient, so they'll ask that. So I don't know if that's that important. Other people will ask, how long does it take to make partner? How often do they get raises and so forth? And in general, the employer is interviewing you because they have a need for someone to do the work, and they don't have an opening for someone above you. When you're asking the employer that, you may give them an indication that you're not going to be happy at the next position you're being interviewed for. Working from home is a big one. So a lot of law firms now do not like remote work. They're against remote work. They want people in the office. Now, many don't. Many partners love working at home, and I was talking to a partner at a big firm in Miami a couple of days ago, and she was wanting to go to another firm because no one was coming to the office. And she felt like she needed to walk around and give people work. So that sometimes is not something that could go both ways. But in a lot of law firms, this is definitely a career killer, meaning this question is something, if you ask it, how much remote work can I do? How much? Because you don't know what the expectations are. You don't know how many days a week they want you there. You just don't know any of that. So if you don't know any of that, it's going to put you in a very bad position if you're trying to making that a priority. Some law firms, not all, and not even as more than 50% are requiring people to be in the office. And so you need to think about that. And a lot of people have had bad experiences with that. I've seen a lot of people scam law firms when they're working from home. I had one guy that said he needed to be home a couple days a week to take care of his sick wife or take her to the doctor or something. And then I found out, he was a patent attorney, that he had never quit his job as an engineer for Oracle, making an incredible salary. So he was working 2 jobs at the same time, and certainly taking calls on his cell phone while he was at the other job. People play all sorts of games when they do it. This is a funny one. People ask about a paternity leave policy. I don't know why, but asking about these things often doesn't go over. I'm not taking sides in politics or anything here or about this, but sometimes when people ask this, it doesn't have. Sometimes people ask about taking a vacation. Now, there is an exception to that. Sometimes people will say, I need a few weeks off because I got a lot of things I need to take care of, or I need to visit something of my parents or something. So that is perfectly fine. Sometimes people will say, I already have a vacation planned for this date. Is that okay if I take that after I start? And asking that, and you ask these questions at the stage after you've received an offer. You don't want to ask about vacations and so forth right away, like in an interview. So people asking, can I take a vacation 3 weeks after if I get an offer, can I do this, is not a good idea. Anything that's assumptive, challenged, sometimes people will come in and say, I really need to get more responsibility. I need to be, and that's not always a good idea as well. So meaning by challenged, sometimes people will say, I really want to run my own deals. I want to be able to go to trial. I want to be able to do this and do that. And if you say that sort of thing, you will give the impression that you will not be willing to stand up and do different types of busy work if you're asked and pitch in. So and this is not just for law firms, this is for any employer. If you go into any interview with a law firm and you act like you will only do certain types of work, that's very harmful, because law firms hate that. There are people that law firms hire that they give them a couple of assignments that they may consider beneath their pay grade, and because of that, they don't do it, or they're hostile about it, or they say, "Can you give someone more junior than me? This sounds like a paralegal's job." This happens all the time, and so if you tell people that you don't want to do that kind of work, then it's going to be very harmful. It makes it look like you have a sense of entitlement. If it's, regardless of what the task is, if you're not going to do it, who's going to do it? You have just, and so you just have to be very careful about this. And people do this all the time. I was thinking not too long ago, I was working with this woman that had gone to Yale Law School, was first in her class from a huge university, and had started off in a major New York City law firm, one of the top 3 or 4, and then for whatever reason had moved to a smaller legal market. I won't say what it was, but a big legal market, but a smaller one, and had gone to work with a big, very prestigious firm there, and was very upset that she wasn't getting as much responsibility, and literally called me crying about needing to move jobs because of this, and very upset. And so this was a while ago, but that's not good. You have to be able to do the things you're asked, and you shouldn't have a sense of entitlement for whatever that is. And so sometimes this is something that a lot of people do. And this, I will be honest with you, is a mistake that I made early on. I didn't know how to interview when I was a law student, and I made this mistake. And the moment I fixed this mistake, I started getting jobs. Very good, closing jobs. But when I was making this mistake, I would go into interviews and I would think, I need to tell this person all about myself. I need to show them what I've done. I need to tell them about my honors. I need to tell them how special I am. And honestly, and this is something also that people do on their resumes. They list every single accomplishment, no matter how small. They say, I was a member of the students for, I don't know, whatever, better gardening at our school. I don't know, but something just completely ridiculous, that all these things, or they make the resume a chronology of everything that they ever did, researched an issue about employment law when they're I don't know, patent attorney or something, but they think it's important to list everything. So no, you don't, you make the interviewer about you and not the employer and the work. So all the interviewer's doing, and what's important to them, is they're seeing if you're interested in the job. That's really what they're most concerned about. Are you moving up? Do you like them? Will you fit in? Is this something that if you get the job, it's going to mean something to you? This is what I talked about earlier. This is extremely important. If you look like you're interested in the job, the employer is going to feel flattered. They're going to think, I'm working at a cool place. That's awesome. And you find good things to say about the firm and the job. And that's one of the most important things in the world. I talked about a while ago in another webinar, some of the most successful people. The most successful people, whether it's Bill Clinton, whether it's Henry Kissinger, these that become very successful people, are able to make people think that they're interested in them and that those people are very important, or that they really like them. This is also, by the way, what a lot of successful grifters and con men do too as well. But the point is that in order to have people give you something, you have to look like you're interested in them and you're interested in the position. So if you make people feel good, they're going to like you. Now, if you seem more impressed with yourself than the job, and you want to talk about it, and you believe that you need to convince the employer that you have the right skills and qualifications and that you've done everything and you were the president of this and the president of that or on this organization, that's not a good thing. All the employer is looking for is, are you going to be around, focused on how you can be of service to the employer and how you're going to help the organization succeed. I can remember some of the people that were the best interviewers with me for different types of jobs. When I was interviewing, just say I'm interviewing someone to work in my house as a nanny or something, like they come in and they talk about how they love children, how they love cooking, how they've taken a CPR class, how all these things that the job may require, they'll make you believe that once they understand the job, that it's stuff they love, and they'll be honest about it, not like paying lip service to it. It's just they're actually very interested in how they can help the organization succeed, how they can make the people look better. And this is what all interviewers do. I remember once interviewing this guy that was interviewing for an HR position, which at the time I think paid, I don't know, 85 or 100,000 a year to do HR in our company. And his job was to find people to work there and to do preliminary interviews and all this. But this one guy that came in blew my socks off. And he was like, what is it you need? How can you grow? How can you make people happier? And all these questions that he was focused on. And then the guy was like in his 20s. It was just ridiculous. And he wanted $300,000 a year because he said he could do all these great things for me. Now, that was a real mistake because he would have gotten a job had he not said that. But the point is that he blew my socks off, that how much he knew and how much he could be of service and help and things. But you do that around the job and the employer. You don't do it necessarily around yourself. You do it around the needs. And a lot of times, people come into interviews acting like the employer needs to impress them. And that's not true. Your job really is to impress the employer. And you make the interview about the employer and what they need. You don't make it about you and about your needs and about what you require and about what you expect and about all these sorts of things. Those things are minefields. The employers need to control you. They need to be in charge. They need to believe that you're impressed by their job, that you're impressed by them. So who would you want to hire if you were an employer? Would you want to hire someone that you felt you needed to impress or you felt you needed to keep happy all the time, or someone that wanted to help you be happy and wanted to those sorts of things? Who would you want to hire? You just have to put yourself in the shoes of the employer. Or would you want to hire someone that went in and talked about themselves all the time? I remember, this is a funny story. Actually, it's not funny. When I was in college, all these banks and different employers came to interview people, and I would get these interviews. And then the employers would ask me to talk about things on my resume. And I would sit there and go into excruciating detail, talking about papers and academic papers and things that were absolutely of no interest to the employers. And I would talk about them for much more than I should have, without asking questions about the employer, without trying to impress them, without asking what they needed, without asking like I was someone that could be hired. And so these are big problems. If you have an ego and you're talking about yourself, you're making a huge mistake. You need to look like someone that can be controlled and that will do the things that are expected of you and not make it about you. So I remember my second year of law school, I was watching the people that were getting jobs at some of these incredible firms. Now, I got a job with a good firm in New York, but I certainly didn't get a job at the best firms. I wouldn't do that until later. But I would get a job with go in these interviews, and people that didn't have as good a grades as I had, people that didn't have the personality, the drive, and would start all these businesses and written books, and none of them were published, unfortunately. But anyway, the point is that I'd done all this stuff, and I wasn't able to get jobs with the same firms as people that I had better grades in, the same firms. And so I wondered, I was like, wow, these people that are getting these great jobs appear to me like they're just, and I don't know what the word is, but they're just milquetoast. They're not that exciting. But there's someone that doesn't, by any stretch of the imagination, have more confidence. I had a lot of confidence. That doesn't have a lot of confidence. They don't have as much confidence as I have. They're not, all these sorts of things. And so that was it. The people that were getting the best jobs, I realized, were people that looked like they would be able to go, that they would work for an employer, and the employer, by God, would be much more important and impressive than them. And they would follow directions and they would do what is asked, and they wouldn't think that they were better than the employer. And that's what I thought. I was like, why should I be working in a law firm when I have this great business that I started when I was in high school? There was an asphalt contracting business that did very well financially. Why should I be working in a law firm? What can you offer me? Why don't you tell me why I should? This is what I've done. I've made all this money. I've done all these things. Why should I be working in a law firm? And then looking at these attorneys and being like, I don't know. You don't seem. So the point is that you have to impress the employer. None of this is about you. You do not have to impress the person. Now, if they say, how are your grades? And you say, I'm third in my class, that's great. But the employer still doesn't need to. You don't need to act as if the employer needs to impress them. You need to be as humble as you possibly can and make the person like you. And this is something, by the way, that the most successful people all do. And I don't know how many different ways to say this, so I'll give you one more example that I think is interesting. So I used to live in a house in Malibu that was originally built as the guest house of a giant mansion next door. And this was a house on a cliff overlooking the water with a path down to the very nice house that this guy had. And I met this man and used to talk to him. And he had a house that was probably the largest beachfront house in Malibu, maybe on the west coast of the United States. Now, it was dated, but it was just something ridiculous, like 30,000 square feet or something. And he had a 20-car garage. This is literally on the beach. You just don't see this stuff. And he was old. He was like probably in his 80s when I met him. And then he also had built the down airport Hilton or the Beverly Hills Hilton. And he'd been a very successful builder. And he had apparently the largest piece of land that had its own lake or something in Beverly Hills. So this guy, meanwhile, I'm living in his guest house that itself I thought was pretty nice. And so I used to talk to him and I'm like, how are things going? And he would always deflect the conversation and be like, oh, I'm not doing that one. It's hard. Things are tight, and deflect the conversation and never allow anyone to be impressed with him. And on the contrary, he would make it so people would like him and he would never bring his achievements and so forth forward. And I thought that was remarkable. And lots of people I met a guy not too long ago that was partner at Goldman Sachs when it went public and made, I don't know, probably $100 million or something. And he, the same thing. I knew him for weeks and had no idea that he was this tycoon and he'd actually started, after I met him, he started another company that became a public company and he was running it. I had no idea. So the point is that people that are the most successful, that get the most jobs, that do well, never try to have people impressed by them. I don't know how to say it, meaning you don't wear more expensive clothes than your boss. You don't drive a nicer car than your boss. A lot of the most successful people, by the way, and as a matter of fact, I would say most of the most successful people do not drive nice cars. They drive older cars that don't attract a lot of attention. They don't want people to try to feel like they need to be impressed with them, because anytime you do that, you're just sending people away and making them uncomfortable with you. And you just don't do it. You want people to like you, and you do that by being very humble. So I'm trying to emphasize this because this is something that hurts a lot of people. Now, it may not be hurting you, but you may be someone that does these things, doesn't realize it, and that ends up ultimately harming you. Think of Warren Buffett, he lives in the house he bought in 1970 for $30,000 or whatever, and drives. And you just don't need to impress people. If you want people to support you, to take care of you, to hire you, you need to be humble. And not humble is expelled from law firms. And again, this is the same thing that partners do. Partners do not act like they're super successful in front of their clients. They don't pull up to their clients' businesses and Rolls Royces. They act like they're servants to their clients, and they're very unobtrusive. They're not. This is what they do. Now, certain attorneys, like personal injury attorneys and things, may be able to get away with that. But for the most part, if you're working for a law firm, that's how people behave. And I'm sorry to spend so much time on this, but it's very important if you're doing it. You have to be humble. You have to not attract attention. You have to do things that will make the employer comfortable with you and like you are their servant. Again, if you act like you have more money, if you act like all these things will hurt you. So you have to be going in with the idea that you want to do the job, that it's important to you. You don't draw attention to any type of accomplishment that's going to make you look like that you think you're more important or better than this job or the employer. Okay, another one is appearing defensive and angry. I've seen this a lot. People have stuff that they need to work through. I certainly have this in my personal life at occasions. So I'm not saying this is something that you don't have yourself, that I don't have, but a lot of times people will go into a job and they may be angry with their former employers. Something bad may have happened. Sometimes they've lost their job during layoffs, or sometimes have been fired by a supervisor who had it out for them. And honestly, this happens a lot. Sometimes something will happen, and whoever they're working for some switch will flick, and I don't know why it is. And the person will be suddenly very, very much unliked. And what's interesting about this is I've noticed this probably more with patent attorneys than any other type of, I see it all the time with patent attorneys. I don't know why patent attorneys get so mad at each other. I don't know why, if someone upsets the boss of a patent attorney, or a patent attorney upsets their boss, why people are so angry, but it definitely happens. And I don't know why, but a lot of times people will also lose their jobs for other reasons and be angry about it. And this just happens. Sometimes people will also be angry at different portions of society. I was interviewing someone not too long ago, and suddenly they started talking about how they were happy with the job we had, but if Trump won re-election, they were leaving the country, and they were serious. And I'm not on either side politically. That's not something that is worth my energy to get involved with, because why would I want to alienate half the country? So that's just my position. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but a lot of times people will take sides on things. I have people all the time that will put these organizations and things on their resume that could potentially cause people to be upset. I saw one woman, again, that was a victim of something. I'm not even going to say what it was, because it doesn't matter, but had on her resume all this stuff about how she was members of all these victim things. And it's obviously the person was very angry. If you start putting things that show you're angry about something, some cause that could be politicizing, that's not good. When people are angry about looking for a new job, or they're angry at their former employer, that comes through and it can be harmful. So the idea is that you need to appear excited. If you're angry or upset or defensive, then that's going to end up not helping you very much. And lots of times interviewers are going to bring up things in your background that will upset you. And you have to stay calm and not get angry. I had an instance once where it was the worst interview that I'd ever had. I had gone out, I had joined my law firm, my first law firm, and I had a good friend of mine from high school that had gone to Harvard Law School, and was working at this entertainment firm on the other side of Los Angeles from where I was working. And when I moved to Los Angeles, I had taken the bar in, when was it? I don't know, July. And so here I was, I'd started my job in like early September, and this guy was calling me to go interview with this firm he made it sound incredible, like people were driving around doing all these deals and convertibles and meeting the stars and stuff. So I thought, this sounds fun. He was trying to convince me to go interview there. But I found out later because he got a commission. But I went to interview there, and I went into this interview, and I was doing a full round of interviews, but I went into one of the first or second interviews, and this guy started saying, "What is wrong with you? Why are you interviewing as a law clerk? How could anybody possibly be so disloyal to their firm? Like, why would we hire you if you're doing this?" And I don't know what was wrong with this guy, but I got very upset, and I was just like crushed. I didn't understand how someone could possibly be so mean. And this friend of mine was literally calling me like 2 or 3 times a week saying I'd be perfect for this entertainment job or whatever. And so finally I said, okay. And I went in, and this is what happened. And I was crushed that I basically, after one more interview, I had no motivation or energy to stay around the firm. I was so upset that I canceled. I was like, I'm done. I'm sorry. I'm not comfortable here. And so I'm going to leave. And then my friend called me after the interview and said, all of your reviews were awesome. Even so-and-so liked you, meaning the guy that was mean to me. Why did you leave? And so the point is that I didn't stay calm. I got angry, and I went home that night, and I remember how upset I was. I had this Labrador that usually was just lying around sleeping, and he could tell how upset I was and came up and was like hugging me the whole night. I was really crushed by that. So you have to be careful about staying calm and not getting angry. And you never want to seem at all negative or judgmental of a former employer. I had something else happen to me that was very funny, but not funny. I was interviewing with this firm that I ended up going to work for, but it was this firm called Dewey Ballantyne in Los Angeles. And I went into this guy's office for an interview, and he was maybe a mid 5th or 6th year or something at that point. And he had this book, this giant textbook about proctology, like it was volume 2 or something, right above his head. I have no idea what was going on with that because he was just a commercial litigator, but he had that, and he was interviewing me and just very uptight and serious. And then he asked me my resume. He said, my brother went to University of Virginia Law School, and he graduated in May. Why do you have June on here? And I said, I think you're right. I think I put the wrong month. And he looked around and was upset. And he basically got up and left me in this office for 15 minutes. And I was just, what the hell's going on? And then he came back. I don't even think he came back. The woman that was in charge of giving me a tour and stuff and leading me to our office says, so-and-so doesn't have time to interview today, and it looks like lunch is canceled for this reason. So I think you're all done. And I was like, wow, okay. And so I left. I didn't get calm. When I got to my car, I was working with a recruiter, and he said, don't worry. I'm going to basically tell them that this was my mistake, that we retyped your resume or something, and I will fix it. And I was like, I don't know. But anyway, he did that, or he called them or something and fixed it. And then a couple of weeks later, I got a call from the firm, and they said, we'd like to have lunch, or we'd like to meet you for drinks or something, and ended up getting an offer. But the point is that had I flipped out there and I was just very calm, or I had started sending emails, sorry for my mistake and everything, I probably would have. And as it turned out, that was just a horrible place to work. Probably the worst career mistake of my life, because the culture was like that, about people being really on edge. But you have to be very careful. This is just another thing that people do. A lot of people talk too much. You have to remember that it's always true that loose lips sink ships. And if you say too much, then you're giving the employer reasons not to hire you. As an aside, I will say that the smartest people that I have ever met and that I know, meaning people often that go to the best law schools and they're smartest there, and they will do much more listening than talking, because you can learn a lot by listening. Whereas if you talk, you will often show your how naive you are. You will show if you give too much information, even if it's to a peer about something, those people are competitive with you, and they will use that information to basically to get back at you, or to compete with you. Or if you provide too much information, you may, I don't know, you can make all sorts of mistakes. You need to be very careful about how much information you provide. You don't need to do a lot of talking. And honestly, the best interviews are when the person doing the interviewing is talking the most. They have to. Like, it's just, you need to be very careful. So I've seen people tell people that they've recovered from drugs, alcohol, things like that. And that's a good thing. I'm sure there's a substantial portion of society that is kicked, whether it's smoking or drugs or alcohol or pills, that has kicked that stuff. And a lot of attorneys are. But the problem is, once you say something like that, you're basically giving people something that they can use against you in the future, or you're framing yourself in a way that people will identify you with other people that they know that might not have had such good results with getting off whatever these substances are. So you have to be careful about this sort of thing. You need to do whatever you can to make sure that you're not telling people about these sort of problems. If you tell people that they will use it against you, they will use it against you in perpetuity, meaning they will remember it and they will question you because of that. And I've actually hired people that told me that they had cleaned themselves up and they were clean and they're doing so well. And since I know people personally that have done this and had good results, I certainly was able to have a lot of understanding and hire them, believing that they deserved a second chance and they were the most qualified for the position. Both of them ended up relapsing. You need to keep things that people can use against you or that will cast you in a negative light to yourself. I interviewed one that when he had a gap on his resume, I asked him where these 3 years were, and he said some answer that didn't make sense. I told him that it didn't make sense, and he told me that he'd just gotten out of prison for doing some sort of fraud. I had to, in the interview, but I had to spend some time doing that, and I did. I had another guy come into an interview. He was actually we had made the decision to hire him, and we're out for a very nice steak dinner in downtown Los Angeles at a great restaurant. And my wife at the time came to the interview, and he told me that his stepson and stepdaughter were, his daughter, I think, and stepson were having a sexual relationship. And he said he was uncomfortable with it. I was very uncomfortable with that as well, and why that was going on. And my wife at the time was visibly shaken. Like, she did not like that. And we thought it was pretty awful. And if someone almost got a job. I've seen people talk about having been in a psychiatric hospital. That's also not good. So you want to be careful with that sort of thing. That was a woman that I interviewed I used to have an office in Las Vegas, and because there's actually people that are very good at talking on the phone there. And that's why Zappos was there and some other things, but that wasn't good. So you don't do that. You shouldn't talk about your church or religion. Now, some people will talk about it. You can interview with firms that have all people that are part of the same religion, and that's okay to do that, or if they're interviewing with someone that's like that, but it's generally frowned upon. Like, anytime you bring up religion, like a lot of times people can tell it from your resume, and people that are Mormon or LDS will often list their missions and things on their resume, which is fine, but you don't want to talk about your church or religion. You just have to, because people will recognize that you're trying to use that to your advantage if they're the same. And usually they will be able to tell that anyway, not always, but sometimes they'll be able to know that. But you don't want to bring it up. You don't need to, because some people are on opposite sides of the political spectrum. I had something awful happen. After September 11th, I had this great candidate in New York that had a very Muslim name. It was like Muhammad Abdullah or something, and something that sounded Muslim. And I'm not saying that name out of disrespect. That's not he, but it was something that sounded that way. And he put stuff like Muslim Students Association on his resume, and he was very highly qualified. Like he was best law schools, best firm, but he was applied to all these firms in New York that he was qualified to work at and that had lots of openings, and no one would hire him. So I don't, you have to do I'm not saying that every law firm is, but this was, of course, over 20 years ago. But sometimes you have to be careful because people have different versions or different feelings about different types of things. And so you don't bring that up. You don't bring up a divorce. Sometimes people will talk about how they are divorced. And sometimes I know a woman right to this day whose husband is living in Thailand and has several girlfriends, and meaning different people coming in and sleeping with him periodically at his house. And she found this out because she thought something was weird, and she hired some kind of private detective. And she is very happy to talk about that with people. And that's probably not a good thing. You don't talk about, and she's still married. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. That was the point. She's still married because she's from this Christian background where you never divorce your husband. It's just crazy. So she talks about that. You don't want to talk about why you got fired from a job. You never say, I made this catastrophic error. I upset this person. I did this. You just talk in vague terms if they ask about why you left. Basically, it's something along the lines of a partner with a lot of business left. There was a major slowdown in the work. They couldn't afford to pay me. Most of the associates had to leave because whatever, but you come up with some reason that it wasn't, that doesn't make you look bad. I'm not saying to lie, but you come up with something that's true, but may excuse whatever happened. Sometimes people will talk about how they grew up very wealthy or poor. And think about this. So talking about being very wealthy is going to make people that grew up poor feel badly, and they will resent you because maybe they became attorneys because they wanted to make a better living and make sure that they were able to, I don't know, join the upper middle class. And so that's going to make them feel envious, or that you think you're better than them, as people did when they grow up. Sometimes people will go in and talk about how they grew up poor. Think about that too. So if you talk about that, someone who's wealthy grew up wealthy may have thoughts about you in one way or another. Someone who is also grew up poor will realize that you're trying to use that to your advantage and may resent you. Or someone that you just have to be careful about these things. Sometimes people talk about diseases and sicknesses and different things that they recovered from. Again, this is not something you want to talk about. The reason you don't want to talk about it is because people will use it against you, just as people will use the fact that you're a former drug addict or something against you. If you talk about these diseases that could come back, that's scary for people too. So I'm not saying that it's right. I'm not saying that all law firms do this, but if you're comparing two people, someone who's healthy and someone who's not, I don't know. You have to, and they're equal. I don't know. Sometimes people may, and again, this is what I would do personally, would have sympathy for you and think that someone that overcame something it's good, but sometimes people won't. You need to be careful. Non-visible disabilities, those can include all sorts of things, which could be, I don't know, but they're things that no one could possibly see. I hired someone recently and I've hired people that have had other bipolar disorder, just all sorts of different things. So sometimes you'll have disabilities that aren't visible. And if you have, then there's no reason to talk about them. Other people will talk about different medical diagnoses. Other people will talk about, and again, this is rare, but I'm only bringing it up because I've seen it, talking about different things that have happened to them sexually. Sometimes people will talk about violent crimes. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with talking about a violent crime, and I wouldn't care, but sometimes that will make them uncomfortable. Sometimes people will talk about recent death and tragedies. And again, that's not something to bring up. And sexual orientation, actually, in this day and age, I think it's perfectly fine. I think that people actually will go out of their way to embrace people from diverse backgrounds. and I think it's a good thing. I think the majority of people would, but you still have a small percentage of people that, for whatever reason, don't. You have right now, just in terms of society, people that are present for Israel, which is the majority of Americans, but then there's people that are against it. Is it right to bring up if you're a pro-Israel supporter or you're a pro-Palestinian supporter? Is it right to get on one side of that issue when you know that there's people that won't look at that? I was reading Rashida Tlaib, a congressman from Michigan, got in trouble because she was making, and again, I don't know what she said, because she was supporting in Palestine, saying something from ocean to ocean or something, meaning implying the elimination of Israel. But she probably went too far, definitely did. But again, like, people don't always welcome this stuff. So you have to keep the stuff to yourself. You just don't want to ever say anything that's going to polarize people, but you need to be very careful. And sometimes you don't want to say things that the employer might want to be associated with. If you look at a lot of the people in a lot of these great firms, there are people that have problems, partners, associates, staff. And these days, I think people are very open to this, but you want to basically steer the conversation to positive things where the employer is enthusiastic about you and where you're not giving them time to take sides. The other thing I would just say is a lot of people very much enjoy interviews. They like talking about themselves. They think it's very fun that they have the opportunity to say things and to get people excited about them, and that they need to talk about their accomplishments. But you need to understand that the interviewer is not your friend. They are looking for negative information that they can use against you, and they're not someone that you should be confiding in, because if you confide in them, you might also do the same thing with the law firm's clients, or you'll spend time confiding with everyone. And in your job with the people that you're working for is to be just like they're going to be your client. So you go into an interview, you decide, you portray yourself in the same way you would if you were talking to a client and trying to get that client to work with you. And you need to be very careful about that and what you say about yourself. And an interview, by the way, is not a therapy session. It's not time to get into any of this stuff. It's just a time where it is a time for you to sell your strengths and not your weaknesses. So the other one is getting caught off and admitting it. People can get caught off guard. It happens very frequently. Sometimes people will say things, the interviewer will say things like the job requires a lot of travel, or you'll be expected to work most weekends, or you'll have various responsibilities you may not have been aware of that are unusual for law firms. Things like that. Maybe you'll learn that you'll have to be responsible for doing things you may be uncomfortable with, which could be training and mentoring people. But regardless of what it is, you need to keep your cool. You don't want to react in any way. You need to smile instead of looking shocked or frowned, because people can read your body language. And again, this is the most important thing about any interview. People go into interviews with the idea that they're screening the employer for whether or not they want to work there. But the opposite's true. Your only job in an interview is to get the job. And you can turn down the job, or you can negotiate the job after you get it. But you need to be very careful about doing everything you can to get the job. So I tell this story a lot. I had someone working for me that was making $17 or maybe $20 an hour, helping put articles, a site I have called JD Journal. I found out she was an attorney, had used to work in a big firm. She was in, Alabama or something, living with her parents, but had worked in a big law firm in New York, wasn't admitted to the California bar. I told her I would help her get a job. She went and interviewed at a small law firm with crappy offices somewhere in California, and I don't want to give away her identity. And she came out and was just like, wow, this firm has crappy offices. I don't think they can even afford to pay me. It's nothing like the big firm I worked in New York. And she found out when I called the partner to talk about it, he said, yeah, she's very highly qualified. And again, this is someone that was working for $20 an hour. The reason they were working with there is because they left this big New York firm because of some health problem that was pretty serious and gone to live with their parents. And they just were, and they've been doing that for 3 or 4 years and didn't know if, anyways, but I talked them into going back to practicing. So they interviewed with this firm. And I called the partners. I don't think she doesn't feel like that it's the kind of place that could afford to pay her. And he said, oh no, I keep my office. Again, this is another thing smart attorneys do. I keep my offices like that because I work for, local real estate people, and I don't want to appear like I have a lot of money. So why would I? And I charge them rates, and so that was his strategy. And I said, how much would she make? And he said, oh, she's going to bill out at $600 an hour, or whatever the number was. And I give all my associates half the money that's collected. So think about that. So instead of working 3,000 hours in a big New York law firm for whatever, a couple $100,000 a year at the time, she got a job that paid over $600,000 a year in a relatively not a big city in California. Think about that. Her working for $20 an hour or working for $600,000 a year. So 40,000 versus 600,000. And I looked her up. This was years ago. She's still there. And again, she would, if I had not saved that for her, she would have just assumed that this was a crappy job. And this kind of stuff happens. It's rare, but it happens. Again, you need to appear self-confident, in control when you're interviewing. You need to look like that you know what the person's looking for, that you can do it. You need to connect with them. You need to like them. And if you get flustered and don't project self-confidence, this is going to hurt you. And again, self-confidence, what does that mean? It doesn't mean you act like you're better, but it means you know who you are and you're confident in yourself. If you were to hire an attorney and that attorney you wanted to hire to represent you personally, say you were charged with murder and it wasn't true, you wouldn't want to hire an attorney that wasn't self-confident, that told you about all their health problems, their political leanings, their former drug problems. You wouldn't do it. So just keep in mind, and if they got flustered and nervous when you ask them questions about your qualifications, you would want someone that connects with you, that understands your problem, that gives you confidence. That's exactly what good attorneys do. And then dressing your best is important. So you have to think about how you dress. Dressing is a big deal. I was at a charity ball and they had this silent auction, and there was a stylist that comes in and does like a closet organization or something for $2,500 for 90 minutes. And I don't know what she charges, but she comes out to your house and does this. And all of these very important businessmen and things, she does mainly men, but I had no need for her. So I gave her to my fiance. But when I bid $500 or something auction, assuming that I would lose, because I was like the first bidder, and I thought other people would. But this is a big business. Like a lot of these very important executives and CEOs and partners in law firms, they use people to help them dress because the way you dress has an impact on how you are seen. Now, I am wearing the t-shirt or not a dress shirt and stuff, but that's probably not the smartest thing to do for these webinars. But when you dress well for an interview and you look your best, and that you show that the employer's important and you're showing respect for them. If you don't dress well, you're showing a lack of respect. If you dress well, you're showing how you would present yourself to clients. So employers want to see this. If someone goes in for an interview and they're well dressed and they look good, it makes them stand out. I have people that come in to our company and interview, and most people these days do not put on a suit, do not look their best. They show up not dressed in kind of casual business stuff, and that's actually okay. But if someone comes in a suit and is dressed very well, or a woman is dressed very well, and the suit fits. Now, I want to say another thing that I've seen, because people don't wear suits and women don't dress up a lot for interviews. What happens a lot is their things don't fit because they're not, whatever job they're in, or a law student or something, they don't fit. So the suit, the shirts are too big, the sleeves go down too far, and the pants are baggy, just whatever, you name it, I've seen it. And this is very common. One of the things, this is actually very funny, and I've seen this unfortunately, more than once, men, when you buy a suit on the arm, there's always like a tag that says the brand of the suit and things. And it's sewn on the suit coat. I don't know why the tradition of doing that for suits, but that's what they do. And obviously it's like you're supposed to take it off, right? You're supposed to take that off when you buy the suit, but I've seen people go into interviews with that. So if that's you need to take it off, but it's very funny. But yeah, but again, when you go and if you dress when you go to a interview, even if it's a casual place, you should not look casual. It's unprofessional and it doesn't work. I'll tell you a quick story. The first firm that I worked at, Quinn Emanuel, got a reputation. And this, again, we're talking about a long time ago when it was a small firm that was growing very fast. When I joined it, it was maybe 40 attorneys. Now it's over 1,000. But when I joined the firm, they had this reputation that was written about in Cosmopolitan magazine and was the only firm in the country doing it, where you could wear whatever you wanted. You could wear sandals or shorts or anything to the interview. Invariably, what would happen is when they would interview, people would show up in shorts and sandals. And none of those people got hired. That's not respectful to the employer. So you need to dress up and look good for interviews. You don't need to wear a super expensive suit, but it needs to fit, and you need to do whatever you can to look professional and to make the employer see what you would look like representing a client if you were going to court, if you're showing up for a deal. Very important. Okay, this is another one I'm not going to talk too much about, but showing up late. You can get a job if you show up late, but it's very rare. Most companies and law firms expect people to be punctual, and an interview is just a tryout. It sends the employer a message that you don't plan well your time, that the job might not be important to you, that you don't value the employer's time. Law firms, when people take time out of their schedule they plan to interview you at a certain time. If you show up late, that's a problem. And it happens a lot. You need to understand what your commute times are to go somewhere. You need to drive there in advance to make sure if it's a commute, or figure out what the commute time is going to be before you leave, and show up early. Just as practice, if you show up early, you're fine, and you can always walk in closer to the time you're supposed to be there. Another one is showing up too early. If you have people show up very early for interviews, especially if there's not a lot of people working in the office at a time, 20 minutes before an interview, I feel it'd be rude for me to make that person wait. I don't want to make them wait. It's going to inconvenience me, and it's going to throw off my day, because I feel when someone shows up late, I feel that it's not nice of me to make them wait. And the employers asking you to be in an office too early, and it's just inconveniencing everybody. So the person may be billing something and talking on the phone to a client, or have plans and want to get off the phone a minute or two, or at the time of the interview. If you show up early, they may get a phone call or a message that you're there, and that is just not always good. Anything you would do that could possibly inconvenience the employer is just, you need to be careful about that. Show up in the lobby downstairs. If it's no lobby downstairs, show up in your car or wherever. Spend some time doing something else, and then walk into the interview a few minutes before it's supposed to start, but not too many minutes. Okay, jokes and comments are a big thing in this particular political and sociological, anthropological, whatever environment. People are very sensitive to all sorts of things. And people still make sexual and racial comments in interviews. I don't know why they do that, but even saying something like, my firm is all people of this ethnic group, or my firm, or I notice a lot of this, whatever, you have to be careful. Now, I will be the first to admit that men are often very clubby with each other and will say things that sometimes are inappropriate. I don't see it very often these days, very rarely, but it does happen. And you need to be very careful. It's something as simple as, I was in an interview once in a firm and someone made a comment about how they'd heard some bad things or crazy things were going on in this fraternity, and that someone knew. Anyway, you have to be very careful. So just the idea that anything that's even mildly suggestive that it could upset someone can potentially get you in trouble. So I don't want to go too much into this, but You have to be very much on your toes. No one in the interview is your friend. Everyone you're talking to is potentially someone that if you make one inappropriate joke or comment, it could hurt you. And so you just need to be very careful. And again, I've seen people do all sorts of stuff. I've seen people make small remarks that indicate that they're on the side of a political issue, that they're on the side of different politicians or different social issues. And you just need to leave this stuff out. It's just, you can't, because anytime, just think about it. Like the interview is an obstacle course. So by an obstacle course, if you go the straight way and you do fine, you're going to get a job a lot of the time. But if you start veering off in one political direction, you may now stand a 50% chance of getting a job. So anything that you do that's going to take you in a different political direction is going to hurt you. So you need to be very careful about anything that's going to put you on the side of one thing or the other. It's crazy. Like, why would you do that? You need to be extremely careful about anything that's going to put you on a side of something. That's that. Now, this is the other thing that people do. It's bad. It's something a lot of times that very kind of academic people do. I notice this, by the way, a lot of times with academics. So when you talk to very experienced attorneys, they typically will cut to the point and give you an answer. When you talk to law professors, a lot of times, it's a different type of psychology, which is one reason it's very hard sometimes for law professors, if not extremely difficult for them to get positions in law firms. It's a different style of thinking. You don't need to give long-winded answers. You need to cut to the chase, because everything that you say, people can imply different things from it. And you don't need to spend 10 minutes answering questions. You don't want to give abrupt answers, but you want to give answers that tell enough of what's asked and without boring people. People, when you're talking to them and having a conversation and they're interviewing, they want to ask most of the questions. They don't want to sit there listening to you talk. I see this a lot. I know lots of people that if you ask them a question, they will suddenly launch into this long answer. And if someone like an attorney is busy, or if the attorney would prefer to be answering questions. Again, the talking ratio that I say is that typically, if it's a good interview, you will be talking much less than 50% of the time, even down to 20%. So if you are giving long answers, you are in trouble. That is going to not work, and people are not going to hire you in most cases because they don't want to imagine you sitting there and talking about something to them for 10 or 15 minutes when you're working for them, because you're going to waste their time. No one's going to tell you to get to the point, but you just need to do this. And a lot of people do this in interviews. You need to respond to questions with a little bit of detail, enough to be helpful. But typically, if someone asks you something, if someone asks you, did you play any sports in college? Yes, I played football and I really enjoyed it. You don't say, yes, I played football and I was a kicker and also a punter, and I loved it because I always loved kicking because I played soccer and when I was young, and my mom always said, you kicked the hardest of anyone and you can score these goals. My coach also said this. And so then when I got into high school, I just walked on to the team and I became a first string kicker when I was a freshman. And I did so well at it. I was actually recruited by several schools. That's what people do. And you don't need to do things like that. You don't need to do it with your experience, and you don't need to do it with anything. And people do this all the time. The way you can tell most of the time, if you're talking too long, is the interviewer may be sitting there looking at you like, yeah, let's hear the answer. And then you start giving an answer and the interviewer just starts looking away or down or something, meaning you bored the hell out of them and they don't want to hear anything else. So you need to be very careful giving long-winded answers. Okay, and then this one is very important, not understanding what the company or law firm does. So when you're interviewing with the law firm, they need to understand that you've taken time to learn about them. It shows you care about your job and your career, and you need to be interested in whatever the company or law firm does. The interviewer has taken time out of their day to speak with you, and the least you can do is to basically understand what they do, and you have to. I've hired some of my worst hires, by the way. When people do this very well, some of my worst hires, I have been conned, not necessarily conned, but blinded by people that have come in to interview with me. I hired one guy for a P type of role, meaning you go to BCG. This is all he did. You go to BCG and you're standing there, and then all of a sudden this pop-up comes up, and I don't even think it's worded very well. I need to fix it, but pop-up comes up saying, hey, sign up for alerts or give us your resume. This is all the guy was hired to do. That particular task, by the way, took him 2 or 3 months. I mean, it's something that should take a day. But so I'm just telling you how bad this guy was. But the point is that he came in the interview, and he was interviewing for a tech position, and he suddenly said, I love your company. I read your articles. This is one of my favorite articles where you talk about this and doing this. And I was like, wow, this guy's incredible. He loves me. And so and he loves our company. He's got all these great ideas. And so I hired him, and he was a horrible hire. But the point is, if you learned enough about the interviewer and you've learned enough about the company, then that's really good. Now, I want to be clear, because I made this mistake when I was younger. You don't drop all that information right away, just regurgitating stuff you may have learned. If something comes up about that where you can bring it up in a good, nice way, then that's awesome. But you can say, I knew about you, this particular attorney, before I ever interviewed here because I read the story about you, or I saw this. And I thought that's a way but you need to be very careful. You don't need to regurgitate stuff, but you need to show that you understand it. And you need to make sure that you frame the reasons that you're interested in the company or firm around those things. This is the worst thing. And so again, research every employer, understand what they do, have a good understanding, talk to people about the employer before you go in if you can, meaning alumni, anybody, and do whatever you can to understand the employer and hopefully the people you're speaking with as well, if you receive their names, and then frame that in a way that they're perfect for what you do and for what you understand. By the way, I just want to talk a little bit about the skill, because this is a very important skill. And all this stuff, by the way, if you are listening well and you're learning all this stuff today, this is not anything you will find on BCG right now. Behind this article, this is very important. But the point is that if you understand the stuff, you are going to and the stuff to follow, going to really do really well in your interviews, because these are all the reasons people don't get jobs. So just understanding the employer very well, not asking obvious questions, perhaps talking to people that have worked there before, all that sort of thing, or having some way to understand the kind of work that they do. But my point too by this is this one skill is something that the best attorneys that get business and become, I know one attorney in LA who's got a guaranteed base salary of $7 million a year because he's got a lot of business. This is the kind of money you can make if you are able to generate a lot of business. These people make it every year for decades in some cases. Think about that. But my point is about this is these kind of people that get these large books of business, the way they do it is they go out and before they interview with companies and before they talk to people they want to do business with, they have an understanding of the business. They learn about the business. They know what the issues are. They say that they've got experience doing the kind of work for this company or whatever it is. So this is what the very best people do, and it's to get business. And if you learn this skill early with interviewing and you make the interviewer feel like someone that is a client and you understand them, that's very good. Okay, this is another one that a lot of people do. And honestly, I made this mistake in an interview once. I was interviewing this is in my second year of law school. I had interviewed with a couple of, I think, a lot of interviews, but the first 4 or 5 firms I interviewed with, I was summarily rejected just right away. And so I went into this interview with this Philadelphia law firm, and they said, how are your interviews going? And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I've already had 5 interviews and I got rejected from each of them. I really need a job. I don't know what to do. And that, of course, was a very good way to get rejected. And that got me rejected very quickly. I did want to just bring up one quick point, too, about understanding the company and what it does, because this just reminded me of the law firm. And I'm sorry to backtrack a little, but one of the jobs I got from my summer position was I had gone into an interview, and the employer the person interviewing me had gone to a law school called Fordham in New York, which is a great law school, but it was not the type of law school that everyone in the firm that he went to had gone to. He's probably the only person. And I got in there and he said something about, here I am. I certainly never went to a school like this, and interviewing kids and excited about it. And so I knew what law school I went to, and I talked about Fordham and how my best friend had gone there. It was part of this Catholic consortium and all this stuff. And the guy just beamed and liked me and hired me, or I got a job. So if you stuff about people, when you go in, you have every way of making them feel good. And that's important. Back to the desperation. I've seen people cry in interviews. I've had people tell me that if I don't hire them, they're close to living on the streets. I couldn't believe this when it happened. And it was for someone just as a desk, working in the front desk in an office. I've said people just talking all sorts about their financial problems, and they really need the job or they need work. And so you need to be very careful about that. It talks about your stability, reliability, and all that sort of stuff. And so I'm not saying, that you're not entitled to have these kind of issues, but employers don't care about any of this. They don't care about you. They don't care about your financial situation. They don't care about your job search situation. All they care about is if you can do the work. And so you need to be confident, and you need to show the employer why they need you and not the other way around. You don't want to need them, or you don't want to make them feel obligated. You want to be able to sell yourself. If you're going in to try to pitch a client, you don't say, we're going to go out of business if we don't get this job. Just think we haven't been able to get any business doing this, but we're really trying our hardest and we really want to get work doing this. That's something you need to do. You need to be able to sell yourself. If you appear desperate or anything, the employer is going to be turned off. So you need to basically just think about it going out on dates. No one likes me. I haven't had any luck with women. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I feel like I've given up on dating. This is my last. All these sorts of things are not going to be something that you would want to hear if someone was doing that with you. And then another one is not too many of these left, but not asking questions. Most employers will end by asking if you have questions. A lot of times people will say, no, I don't have any questions, but thanks for asking. I think you pretty much answered everything I wanted to know. And what do you say then? You say, I feel like I have a good understanding of this place, someplace I really would like to work. I really appreciate the opportunity to interview here. I really hope that we have the opportunity to speak further. Not, no, I don't know. Or if you haven't asked questions, you can always ask things like, what could I do to really get off to a good start? What would make me look the best to everyone here in the first 30 to 90 days? Something, asking questions like that. You make people, or you say, what would you see my typical day be like, and what could I do to help you that people might not always think about doing, like things that make them feel good about themselves. So just that alone, by the way, could get you a job if you understand how to ask those questions. And if you don't have any questions, the employer is simply going to believe that you're not that serious, or if they say they've answered anything, or I'm not going to take any more of your time. So you can make a statement about how much you like the firm or how impressed you are or whatever, but you need to say something. And many times, if you don't have any questions, the employer will not think you're enthusiastic. So again, like people, and this is very important to understand. So people, when you go into an interview, want to feel like you like them and you're enthusiastic. I tell this story, is another story I tell all the time, but it's important. When I was young, I went to pick out a dog. There was like 15 of these little Brittany Spaniels barking around. One of them ran up to me and started cuddling and everything like that. That's the dog I picked. When I met my first wife, she walked up to me in a bar and said, "You're the only guy in the law school that's never tried to talk to me," which, you're the only one I wanted to talk to, or something. That's a pretty good way to start things off. So if people think you like them, and then they're going to be much more likely to want to work with you or want to hire you. So you need to look with the right questions, will look like you're a really good candidate for the position. And then these are other things that people do. They appear nervous or anxious. Sometimes nervousness is actually okay when you say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just really excited to be here." But nervous or anxious isn't good. Some people get extremely nervous. They'll start sweating. They'll have breathing problems. I've seen that. And again, you need to basically imagine that you are an attorney meeting with a big client, trying to get the business from them. If you appear nervous and don't have the confidence, then that's going to hurt you. You definitely don't want to do that. I just thought of a funny story. When I had this asphalt business, when I was growing up, I hired salespeople to work for me. These two salesmen once went on a call, and they were trying to get work from trying to get paving asphalt job from, a big bowling alley or something, which would have been a lot of money. And the other one told me that one of them took out like a little thing of whiskey and drank a whole bottle before he went in to try to pitch the business, saying, "This is my liquid courage," or something, to steady my nerves. Some people, it's very funny, but you need to look very competent. You don't want to send the wrong message. You don't want to make the employer worry if you're someone that they couldn't put in front of clients and you're interviewing to be a representative, and you need to be cool. So what do you do if you appear nervous or anxious? You figure out how to solve it. I don't know what the ways are. There's breathing exercises, there's all sorts of things, but you need to be very careful about appearing nervous or anxious when you go in. People don't like that. This is another thing that a ton of people do, is they lie or exaggerate. If you're an attorney in a major firm, a lot of times people will lie or exaggerate about certain things. So they may say that they've done different types of things that they haven't done, and say they have. They'll exaggerate things, and a lot of times they will get caught. So I was interviewing once for a law firm position, a corporate position at a law firm. This is one in New York, and it was a big firm. And I went into an interview, and they asked me something about what kind of summer experience I had. And I said I was involved in some due diligence, and I just was saying all these terms. And then the partner, or it was actually an associate interviewing me, said, "What kind of due diligence were you involved in?" Actually, I didn't even know what due diligence meant. I was told I was doing that, but anyway, I didn't know. And so that was pretty bad. I exaggerated, because I didn't really know what the part of the work I was doing was due diligence. I had another thing that was very funny that happened. This is just another quick thing. I have a relative on my father's side that was the Attorney General of Hawaii and still living there after his career. And so I was interviewing as a law student with a Hawaii firm, and they were actually filming the interview because obviously they didn't want to do a callback. And they were filming the interview, and I said, "I have a relative that was the Attorney General." And they said, "What is his name?" And I didn't know, because it's not someone that it was my grandmother's sister's son or something. And so that wasn't good. And you should never exaggerate your experience. You don't have to talk, and you don't need the experience for any job. Anybody that likes you, if you do a good job in your interviews, will hire you based on your whatever, by liking you, not because you've done due diligence or because you've done one thing. Almost everything you do as an attorney, if someone likes you, they know you can learn on the job. So you don't need to ever lie or exaggerate. You just basically, if you're honest, that's good. People will like you more if you're honest and you say, "I haven't done this, but I'm excited to," than if you say you've done it and act like you're very competent in it. That's just not something that you need to do. And again, I just want to stress, I've said this before, but your first 5 years or so in a law firm are all training. So it's fine not to know how to do something. There are partners in the largest American law firms that have never done a trial and are litigators. There are tons of them. It's not even like it's not even like a few percentage points. It's probably a lot. So I would say more than 10% of them haven't, maybe 20 at some firms, maybe 30. You don't have to ever lie or exaggerate. You just need to act like you're a good learner. And then this is another one that people do. They go into interviews, and there's just a few more of these. And I know this has been a little bit of a long webinar, but it's all very important. Not trying to identify with the interviewer company during an interview. What all law firms and interviewers want to see is that they're going to be comfortable. So what would you do if you were interviewing people? You would want to hire people. Let's see what's going on here. Just trying to see something. Yeah, if you were an interviewer, you would want to hire people that you identify with. That could be, you could see being your friends, or you would be comfortable working with. This is why firms tend to be all one type of. They tend to have people that are very similar. I've seen firms where the people are all the same religion or have similar backgrounds. And so you need to be careful about that. And you want to make sure that people identify with you and see you as a peer or someone that they like. And so that doesn't mean you have to be a certain race or a certain sex or a certain religion, but it does mean that you need to identify with them and be likable and not someone that they can see as adverse. So law firms will hire people they feel comfortable with compared to those that they see they might not get along with. You need to really try to connect with the interviewer however you can. And I don't know, I've talked so much today about talking about things that make the person feel good about themselves, by all this sorts of things, but connecting with people is very important. There are certain people that are able to connect with people and they listen to them. They use their name when they talk. They steer the conversation away from employer uncomfortable topics. They make the person feel like in a way that they identify with them. An interesting story about Henry Kissinger. He just rose to these incredible heights got networked with presidents of countries and all these important people when he was very young. And he had an ability to go up to anyone and make them feel that they liked them a lot and make them feel like they wanted to, without him asking, introduce him to important people. And so the best people are able to identify and be likable. And you don't have to do that naturally. There's Dale Carnegie, like How to Win Friends and Influence People. Warren Buffett said that's the most influential class he ever took and had a little certificate of it behind his desk, I think, where he said it was the best $5 or whenever he took the $10 you ever spent. So you have to learn how to identify and connect with other people. And you may not do that naturally. You may not know how to understand that. You may identify with people that are athletes like you, or people that come from a certain Southern background. I don't know, but you need to be able to identify with certain types of people, and everyone. And there are people that can do that, and you need to learn how to do that. You need to, and a lot of times, the most important thing you can do is you can just try to think positive thoughts about people. There are people, and just so you understand, the statistics are interesting. About 1/3 of the people that meet you will like you. About the other 1/3 won't care. And about the other 1/3 will just take a look at you and they'll reach conclusions about you based on whatever, who knows, and they won't like you. So those are the odds you're up against, and everyone is. But there are people, probably, that's the average person, who have much higher conversion rates. More people, most people like them. And so you have to figure out what they're doing, and you have to think positively of people. Like, my dad tells me the story, and he was and again, I've told the story a lot, but I think it's very important. He was in the CIA, and he was meeting with his handler in a doctor's office where he would go in and pretend like he had a doctor's appointment, and then he would be assigned a random room in this doctor's office and then meet with his handler. It was funny. But he was talking negatively about someone that he was supposed to be ingratiating himself with and spying on. And the handler, who was very experienced, said, you should never think of this stuff, otherwise you'll show it. So you never want to think negative thoughts about your interviewer or anything. You want to come across as someone that identifies with them. And then other times, this is another big one, is employers will ask you where else you're interviewing, what other types of interviews are you doing, all that sort of thing, or who else are you talking to, or you may answer that question improperly. And you need to be very careful about bringing up other law firms and companies you're interviewing with. It shows the employer that you may not be their first choice, and it gives the employer reasons to potentially dislike you. So a lot of employers don't like people from competing firms. Other things happen. For example, sometimes they'll say, oh, I'm interviewing for a federal clerkship, and that's not good. Or I'm interviewing for this public interest job, that's not good. Or I'm interviewing for this in-house job, that's not good. Employers need to believe that you want to work in a law firm, and that's it. They don't want to think that you're going to leave and go do a clerkship, because most people that leave and go to clerkship apply to other firms because they think they get a better job, and then they go to work there. Employers don't want to, believe that any of this stuff. You don't want to talk about this. You have to be very careful about talking about where you're interviewing. I had a very interesting experience when I was applying for jobs in Los Angeles. I was coming out from Michigan and talking to these different firms. And I interviewed with a very small firm. They asked me where else I was interviewing. And I started talking about all these big firms like Latham and Watkins and things. And immediately the guy's just, his face just changed, his associating. He's like, we only want people that want to work in firms like this. And why would you apply to work with us? And so that destroyed the interview. It actually would have been a great place to work. So you need to be very careful about talking where else you're interviewing. If you bring up a much less prestigious firm, they're going to think that you're desperate for the job, and they're not going to like that. If you bring up something far more prestigious, they're going to believe that you're the second choice. So you need to be very careful about that. So showing that you may be interested in a less prestigious place, showing that you're interested in a more prestigious place, showing that you're interviewing with places in a different practice setting is not going to hurt you. You have to be very careful about how you answer that question. And you basically need to say, I'm looking at other opportunities, or this is the only opportunity that I'm really taking seriously because I like it for this reason. Or just, I'm trying to look at different places, but most of the places I've interviewed, you have to be very careful. You don't need to tell them everywhere you're interviewing. If it's a peer firm, you need to tell them that. And then if they come out and they tell why they're better and stuff, which is a good thing, then you need to be very careful. When I was interviewing with Quinn, for example, I remember he asked me where else was I interviewing, and I said I only brought up one firm because I knew it was a peer firm, because they had all these people that had done clerkships and gone to great schools. And I told them the firm's no longer existence. I'm interviewing with Heller Ehrman, and which is a very similar firm in terms of the office size. And he just said, you need to be very careful of branch offices or something, because and he said, that's good you're interviewing, but you need to be careful of branch offices. So people, just need to be careful. And then references, it's not a big deal. Sometimes employers will ask for references. A lot of people that go into interviews that do very well will carry a little folder with them, and they'll have references. They'll have their resume with them, which you should also have a resume always available. Sometimes you'll walk into an interview and the person won't be able to find your resume in their email or won't have been given it. And so you need to have all that available, and you need to have the references are available. You need to have your resume available. And so you should always have all of that stuff prepared. It just makes you look competent. People that bring that in, it's showing almost that you're already working for them, meaning you've put all that information together. They're ready to do business. You have the stuff they need. And if you don't, that just makes you look like you're not necessarily going to be the best. So people that get jobs and offers that do really well, almost universally, not always, but almost universally will carry things in with them. Now, it's not, some people have so much confidence and do so well in interviews and connect so well with people just right off the bat that becomes that they don't do it and they're fine. But again, having that stuff available is important. This is another big one, cell phone. You need to turn that thing off and put it away right away when you go into an interview. You should not even, if you can leave it in the car, that's a good idea, or leave it at home. I've had people answer their phones in the middle of an interview, and it's just crazy. And texting during the minute, or their phone's ringing and turning it off. And it's just not good. If you're doing that, it's a very easy way to not get a job. I had something, it's not very funny, but I had something happen once where somebody that was working for me, and I was talking about an assignment. His father was a famous actor, but he was working for me in downtown Los Angeles as a writer or something, took a phone call from a woman that he was not married to, that was married, working in our office, and basically said he needed to go pretty quickly because she needed his help with something, and he's having an affair. It's just crazy. But you need to just keep and this is a true story. And so you need to be really careful about your phone. You need to just get rid of that thing. You can't look at it between interviews when you shouldn't even be looking at it in the waiting room. You just put it away. You're there to talk to the firm. That's it. And if you're distracted or you're doing this stuff, it's not good, and people don't like it. This has been a long webinar, and I think we've given a lot of information. And if you're able to master these elements, you'll do very well. Now, this is going to be put up on BCG in a short time, and then the webinar will also be put up. I know this is a lot of information, but right now we'll just take a quick break for just a few minutes. And then when I come back, I'll answer questions. Again, these questions can be about anything related to this webinar. or related to your career. I think this webinar today was extremely important. I think if you are able to look at this stuff, you will do very well. I think this is the product of decades of watching what doesn't work. And all of these things, if you understand them, could potentially change the course of your life, because you will get jobs that other people don't because they make these mistakes. And just remember that each one of these mistakes, this is the final point I just want to bring up. So your job when you go into an interview is to do nothing but get the job. And an employer, when they're interviewing you, an employer wants to hire you. That's exactly what they want. They don't want anything else but to hire you. They want to hire you because they don't have to interview other people. They can say, we found our person, we're done. We don't have to spend all this time just talking to people and going through this exercise. We're done. And they don't like having to talk to lots of people. It's not fun for them. If an attorney's billing out at $1,500 an hour and they need to spend a half hour or an hour with you, that's money that the firm is losing. That's hours that the attorney's not getting credit for, or that they're losing because they're not working on their clients. So everyone wants to hire you. They want more than anything to hire you. The only way they won't hire you is if you make these mistakes that I've talked about. So you have to be very careful about all of this. Your job, when you go into an interview, they already know you can do the work. They're perfectly willing to, they want to make you an offer. They want to hire you. But at each stage of the game, you're making mistakes. And so those mistakes mean you have all these landmines. I probably should not draw it, but it's like this, like you're going through and there's all these landmines. All you need to do is avoid them and you will do well. But most people that go into interviews, especially nowadays, make these mistakes. So I will take a quick break. And then when I come back, I will answer questions. Congratulations, by the way, for watching this whole thing, because it's going to help you. I will say that not every week, but every couple of weeks, I get a message from someone that spent a lot of time with this type of material and saying that they've done this, that they're the biggest partner and all this stuff, and that they've used this stuff to help their career. So this, if you understand this stuff, will just make a gigantic difference in your success. So again, I will come back and answer some questions, as many as you have. So I pretty much set aside as much time as we need to answer questions. All right, so we'll get back to this. Let me just pull up a Word document so we can get through the questions. And it looks like there's a lot of questions today, so that's good. I always love answering these questions. And people actually, by the way, if you have a question and you don't think it's a good question, it probably is a good question, or you're embarrassed to ask the question. So one of the things also about questions, and let me just pull up the things I can show the screen, is that, sorry about that. Okay, so we're doing questions. It looks like there's a lot of good questions this week and a lot of questions. One of the things I wanted to say as well is if you're signed into Zoom and you have an account and you think it's showing your name, no one, I always make sure that I don't show people's names. So everything is 100% confidential. And you can pretty much ask questions about anything to do with your career. I have found that a lot of times the questions people are most embarrassed about, or they think are the least important, are the best questions. So you may have questions and be practicing for 30 years. You may have questions that have been practicing for 5 years. You may be a law student. You may be a new attorney without a job. Whatever your situation, the questions that you have are going to be very beneficial to people that are here, regardless, or people that look at the answers to this in the future. So I encourage everyone to ask good questions and determine, depending on what you're interested in. I will go through these randomly, but again, I will talk about each of them. And I do think that this was just a very good topic this week. Never done this particular presentation. I hope everyone has learned a lot so far. Okay, so this question is, if an attorney loses their job that had due to a supervisor who had it out for them and a switch flipped, how can the attorney present themselves and explain the situation in interviews, particularly for younger or mid-level attorneys? Okay, so the first thing is everyone on this webinar should understand something, and this is very important. Most attorneys lose their jobs at some point or multiple times. So I want everyone to understand that. Regardless of how good of an attorney you think you are, you will lose your job. If you are at a super prestigious firm and you graduated order the coif from a top 10 law school, and you will probably be told, not all of them, and it's actually much fewer these days, but you may be told that you're done and therefore need to find a new job when you don't make partner because the firm doesn't make partners, whatever. Or you may lose your job because you make a mistake at some point in your career. You may lose your job. So everyone will lose their job. So just be aware of that. Now, it doesn't mean you always will. If you study the kind of stuff that I talk about and write, and other people do too, I'm not saying I'm the only person that does this, but if you study law firms and if you study what it means to keep jobs and what you need to do, and I think I have a lot of information about that can help you, but if you study that sort of information, you will become more successful. Just as if you study finance and you learn everything you can about how to, trade copper or something, you'll become better than people that don't. So everything is about learning how to make good decisions and doing that in the right way. There's an interesting book, by the way, called Nudge by some University of Chicago and some other people. But anyway, it doesn't matter, but that you make decisions based on the information you have. So when you're buying stocks, some people will have much better information than you have, and they're going to do better than people that you get the idea. Or someone that knows everything that's played tennis for 20 years will know a lot more than someone who's new and have an advantage. So this kind of information will help you. But let me just get back to the point. Most attorneys lose their jobs at multiple points in time. So one of the things that's very important, and this is something that this point alone could change the course of your career and what you do and how you succeed. When you are interviewing with firms, you are basically, oh my God, when you're interviewing with firms, you're basically when you're interviewing with firms, what you're basically doing is you are your own client. So imagine if you were representing a murderer and you went into court and you said, oh, this is not a good person, they've done this in the past, and they've made these mistakes, and that's not what attorneys respect. So there's something in the legal profession, and basically the DNA of the legal profession, that says when you go into employers, you want to make sure that you are representing yourself, and you're doing so in a way that the client would expect. So do you talk about losing your job? No, you don't. Do you talk about a bad supervisor? No, you don't. So what do? You have to basically come across as a person. You say they didn't have enough work. The firm was having problems or something that related to my practice area. That whatever it is, you have to bring it up. And or worst comes to worst, you just say something along the lines of it may not have been a good fit or whatever, but you try to bring that up. One thing I would say too that's interesting is when attorneys are looking for jobs in other parts of the country based on instead of where they're at, maybe they're moving to where they grew up or something. Law firms like that and tend to give more interviews and make more hires for a lot of reasons, but one is because they don't have that kind of suspicion in the background. So what I just recommend is if this stuff happens to you, just keep applying to firms. Most of the time, if someone needs you, they're not going to ask a lot of questions. If you're trying to get a job at a peer firm, it's going to be harder than if you're trying to get a job at a lower ranked firm in terms of prestige levels, but you just need to be very careful in what you say. You don't want to explain the situation. You basically want to give the impression that the work wasn't there, that they didn't have work for junior associates or mid-levels, and there's a lot of explanations you can give for not having a job there anymore, but they need to be accurate. But that's about it. Or maybe you don't want to practice a certain type of law and you want to do something new. I don't know, but you have to be very careful about that question. And I hope that's a good answer. But the idea is you have to think on your feet as any attorney would do and represent yourself effectively. Okay, when it comes to appearing defensive, are there any subtle signs or body language cues the interview should be aware of? How can candidates become self-aware and avoid potentially coming across as defensive? The idea is if you're asked a question about something, being defensive means that you're almost like angry with the person for asking the question, that your face frowns along those lines. So I'll just tell you a quick question, or a quick thing that happened to me. I was interviewing this girl not too long ago, a couple of years ago, to be a personal assistant. She had this kind of gap on her resume and the interview was going great. She was selling herself. She was just on fire. And anyway, so she was asked something about, she had this gap on her resume. And I asked her about it, and her whole demeanor changed. She frowned. She became just upset, and she grimaced at me. And so that's what defensive is. And so that particular person got mad about something. So you should be prepared for anything negative, that comes across. There's a Pink Floyd song where they say, exposing every weakness, no matter how carefully hidden or something. And that's what attorneys do, and they're attorneys. Their job is to pull up this sort of information. So you need to look at that and be careful that whatever they say, you can come across with a good answer and be aware of anything that comes up. And so the second you're defensive, that creates problems. So people become defensive about a lot of things. So your job is to get a job. Sometimes people will be asked questions that are inappropriate, like about marriage or children or different things that just shouldn't be asked about whatever. And then they become defensive. If an employer does that, that's not something, you don't have to go work there. But if you want to work there, then you need to be very careful about how you react to that. Because if you say to someone, I'm not comfortable with this, that's going to hurt you, and you're not going to get the position. So people will do things that are inappropriate. People will ask you questions about things that are weaknesses in your resume. They'll ask you if you don't have a grade point. They'll ask you about your grades. If you don't have, if you have a gap in your resume, they'll ask you about that. If you're, I don't know, appear like anything that you can think of, they will ask you about. So you need to be very careful. And anytime you're asked those questions, you want to make sure that you're aware that you could be asked them, and just rehearse answers that you can think of that are positive in your background. And so the final thing I just want to say, and I apologize for spending so much time on this question, but the most important thing that you have to understand is that anytime an attorney is asked something by a judge in an oral argument, the attorney needs to turn it around and make it look like whatever this negative answer or negative aspect of their case is, that it's actually a positive. This is the most basic thing that attorneys do. It's what you learn when you're in moot court. It's what you learn when you're doing briefs and things as your first year for legal writing or whatever and arguing. So this is the number one requirement of an attorney that you learn very early, is to take any negative statement and anything that's questioned that's negative and turn it into a positive, or give a really good answer that makes the person like you and believe in it, or empathize with you. So this is what attorneys do. And so your inability to do that will create issues. And so a lot of these things, like, attorneys forget, like, you learn this stuff when you're in law school, but then you forget about it and stop doing it when you're interviewing or practicing. Okay, some candidates may feel the need to devolve extensive personal hardships or challenges faced during interviews. Can you provide guidance in striking the right balance between sharing relevant information, resilience, and avoiding oversharing to the point it could do potential players? Okay, so here's the deal. So you have two people that you're choosing from. You have someone with all sorts of, maybe with, I don't know, someone who was convicted of a crime or had drug issues, whatever, etc. Someone with no issues. So what would you do if you were choosing between those two? Come on, if an employer has a choice, who are they going to choose? It may show resilience, and resilience is a good thing, but people become defined by anchors, by things that they say, and people will see them in that way. It's up to you if you want to portray the stuff. Sometimes you'll talk about someone, I don't know, again, I'm not trying to be prejudiced here. I'm not trying to judge people from these backgrounds, but I'm just telling you, you have to consider what you would think if you were an employer. So I don't know. You have to think about that. Now, certain people I've seen will say, I'm a cancer survivor, I'm this, I'm that. And it's very positive to have those things in their background. But the people that put that down, I just want you to understand, if someone has, I know a woman that has her own practice who's very successful. She says on the site that she's a cancer survivor when they talk about her amazing background. That's great. I know, but you don't see, let me just be clear here. When an attorney, if you go to a big firm website and you look at the attorneys, and I just want you to think about this way, because this is actually very important. If you look at the backgrounds and the bios of all the attorneys, pretty much any big firm, they're not going to say something like, this person overcame a horrible heroin or OxyContin addiction, I'm a proud survivor, or this person is a cancer survivor, and this person is successfully living with Parkinson's disease. This is not what firms do on the bios of their websites. They don't. So I don't know why they don't. Do they think that, and again, I'm not trying to be prejudiced here. I'm just telling you to look at what's out there. Why don't they do that? Why don't they want their clients to see that? Why? Well, I don't know. Again, or maybe that's just something that is inappropriate to talk about to a potential client. I don't know. Okay, I don't know. Is a client going to judge an attorney differently if they learn that they overcame a Vicodin addiction? I don't know. Again, that's not my concern. But you need to look at what the real world says. And again, the law firm. So just think about it this way: the law firm is your client. So the law firm is your client. You need to do things that that attorneys would do to impress their clients. Is it okay for an attorney to go in and tell a client that they've overcome a 10-year addiction to crystal meth? I don't know. I'm not going to be a judge there, but you certainly don't see people doing that on law firm websites. So the law firm is your client. When you are an associate, you are associate. The law firm or the partners are all your client. They have work and you do it for them. And if you impress them, learn how to do that, you do well. So partners are your clients. So all these things are really important to understand. You have to act like that. So if you want to talk about this stuff, think about, is this something that a law firm would put under the bio of their attorneys? I don't know. Maybe that'll help you. But you need to be very careful. I think it's very impressive when people overcome this stuff. I'm personally very impressed by it a lot of times, and I identify with it because I've had, for example, parents that have had someone, my stepfather died of cancer, my mother, alcoholism, just all these things. So I identify with it. But again, do you want that in your attorney if you were hiring your attorney? Would that be something, if someone that was trying to get your business, would that impress you? And you have to think about it that way. And I'm not trying to be harsh, and I'm not trying to say law firms are bad places, but I'm trying to say that all the stuff can potentially harm you. Okay, and working with recruiters who reach out through LinkedIn unsolicited, a bad idea. What are the consequences of working with recruiters little about? Okay, so I personally, if you know me and I've never reached out to you on LinkedIn, it's like anything, like the people that are the best at something aren't necessarily doing that. This is something that recruiters use now all the time. They contact people on LinkedIn, preferably because they don't have the wrong candidates. So let me tell you a little bit about that. It's anytime a recruiter is reaching out to you about a law firm job, it's probably most of the time it's at a huge law firm that, but it's like anything. And again, I'm not being critical of the industry. I'm not being critical of anything. But if you are someone that wants to be a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch, you will start there with no business, and you will be expected to cold call people, to your friends from high school and college and whatever, and then your relatives of your parents, your friends of your parents, people that may be part of your parents' country club. This is what a new financial advisor does. So they do that because no one otherwise is going to do business with them because they don't have their own clients. And so a new financial advisor, that's what they do. They cold call and try to find people. But the problem is they don't even know what they're doing yet, right? So they don't know what they're doing. So because they don't know what they're doing, that they have to get clients like that. And then not only that, but they need to learn what they're doing. So what happens in this situation? Most people quit because they can't get clients. So most people quit. then the ones that stay with it, some become very good. And some become very good. So what does that mean? That means that they have plenty of business, and they've learned how to succeed in the profession, and they don't cold call anymore. Do you think someone that is the head of a giant hedge fund or something is cold calling people looking for business? They've got more people than they have all these bars and things to enter. In my case, no, I don't cold call or message people through LinkedIn because I've been doing this for so long. I know what I'm doing. Not only that, but just to tell you how sophisticated this business is, there's over 300 practice areas. We work with over 10,000 law firms, and it's just insane. Like how, when you have a lot more experience, how it can make a difference. So if someone's reaching out for you to LinkedIn, that means they're getting established. They don't necessarily know what they're doing yet, or that may be what they're doing. And then they're new. So the problem with that is, and I'm not saying, sometimes a very experienced recruiter may reach out to you to be the general counsel of a company if you're a partner. I mean, I'm not saying that it's always bad, but the problem is people need to learn what they're doing a lot of times. There's all these things you need to say to law firms to get them interested and not do things. There's just a lot to the business, and there's a lot you need to understand. So is it a bad idea? Typically, what happens, and I'll just tell you how most recruiters work. We don't work this way because I'm not going to talk about myself, but people will subscribe to services and there's only one or two services that give them access to list of attorneys and big firms, and then also give them access to big firm jobs when they come out. Sometimes they come out. The law firm posts a job on their website, and boom, the service will email recruiters in big cities like New York. All of a sudden, you'll be inundated with LinkedIn and calls and things. And and then people will just try to get your resume and hope. So that's how it works. So if you're getting a call like that, is it a bad idea? They're talking you into applying for the job. Maybe that sort of thing. So if that's what you want, that's perfectly fine. But most of the times the recruiters on LinkedIn are going to only have a few jobs. So if you go to BCG, and I don't want to brag here, but typically there's 3,000 jobs that we have. I'm just telling you, and other big recruiting firms may have similar resources. All we do are law firm placements. And again, I'm not trying to brag here. I'm just placements, all we've ever done. We have 10,000 law firms we work with. We have history. And again, I'm trying to show you what it looks like when you look deep in something, the history. So we know where every person's ever interviewed, where, tens of thousands of people, have interviewed. So we have every job that a law firm has ever had in the past and future. So we have things that every job, and again, I don't want to talk too much about this. I'm going to move on because this is not a BCG, but every job a firm ever had. So the point is that there's nothing necessarily wrong with if a recruiter wants to tell you about a big firm that everyone knows has a job, if you go to their website and tries to work with you for it. But if you, and they can throw your resume in the pie and we'll see what happens. But the point is that this business, like any business, the longer someone does it, the more sophisticated they become, the more people they know, the more they know how to do it, the more established they are. So again, everyone starts somewhere. It doesn't mean that's a bad thing. And every very successful person, when they're younger, often is much hungrier. So it's not, so there's pluses and minuses, but I think that should be enough to answer a question. Again, without saying anything negative about new recruiters, because I certainly was one at one time. That's how things work. But what I don't like about just reaching out to people is that they should have a lot of satisfied clients. If they've made a lot of placements, then it's all they can do to keep up with those placements, trying to go to new firms. Like they should have nothing but doing that. So even after I was doing it for 2 years, like I think my first year, I had more work than I could handle just from people that I'd placed or referrals from the people that I placed right away, actually within 6 months. So because I was good at it and I understood it. So it's just, that's how it works. So someone that's reaching out on LinkedIn, You don't know. And I hope that answers your question. But that's what most people do. But they don't have people coming to them or people that they've placed many times. So that's what they do with their time. I think it'd be more, and just one final thing, I hate to keep harping on this. If I was someone reaching out to candidates on LinkedIn, and that's how I spent my time, I think my time would be much better spent trying to look for jobs for my existing candidates and place them than just sending people to one firm and hoping something great happens. It's just my opinion. And some other firms that came out on this list. Okay, how do I do a lot? I find to do a lot better in interviews when I have a sense of what questions will be asked to me. Is there a standard set of law firm interview questions that a person can prepare to look over in interviews? So yeah, there are. If you search BCG, then you can find them. There's articles about them. I don't know enough articles I've written. There's other things, but typically they're going to be about just experience. They'll be about your things you like. There's just a bunch of things that could possibly be asked. Would look at that. But but you need to be prepared for anything. So you need to understand your background. You need to understand sometimes they'll ask you about your interest outside of work and that sort of thing. I hope that helps. But I would look up BCG, like the standard questions, because there's so many of them. And those that would be helpful. Okay, so let me see. Can you provide some guidance on maintaining a positive and composed demeanor when faced with challenging interviews or stressful situations? How can job seekers effectively handle interviews who may intentionally try to throw them off balance? The first thing is, if someone's trying to throw you off balance, I don't really see the point of trying to work there. These kind of questions, by the way, are very common when MBAs and things are trying to get jobs in investment banks that have their choice of thousands of hungry people that could work there, big jobs in investment banks where people can do hedge funds and things. These are very common that people do that. But law firms typically, in my experience, won't try to throw people too much off balance. The law firm, you just have to understand when you're going in for an interview with a law firm, the law firm is actually trying to find someone that they're losing money. They have work that's not getting done. They're losing thousands of dollars a day. They need someone to do the work. The partners are doing work that they don't want to be doing. So if you're asked those questions, which is rare, you need to be able to prepare. You need to be able to have a good response. So most of the stressful questions are going to be related to losing jobs, things in your resume, why you're looking for a new position, why things along those guys, why you've had so many jobs. That's another big one. Like, why did you move 3 times from 2 years or whatever? Those kind of things. So you need to be prepared for answers, and you need to have good answers when you're asked those sort of questions. But just remember, by the time a law firm brings you in for an interview, they want to hire you. They want to hire you because they're losing money by not having someone in your role, or having work, having work that's not getting done or whatever. Most of the time, a law firm is not going to try to throw you off balance. But the big questions they're going to ask that are going to be related is the big one they always ask. And actually, this is an answer for the previous person that asked about the questions are asked. Almost always, why are you looking? So that's the biggest one you're going to be asked. Why are you looking? Or why aren't you currently working? So those are the biggest questions that are you not currently working? So those are the biggest questions that can be asked. And so you need to be prepared for those. Other things, why so many jobs? Why did you move? That sort of thing. And those are the biggest questions you need to be prepared for. And if you are prepared for those questions, the answer that you want to give is going to be more related to making sure you're looking like positive and you're looking like you're moving up and instead of down. So let me just see here. Okay. So this is another thing here. Why do they ask where we are interviewing? I had a firm ask them, want me to know if the other firm makes me an offer. Here's a point that's actually very interesting. You are always much more attractive when other people are competing for you or you with interviews or offers. So it's interesting, and I shouldn't even talk about this, but I will. When BCG candidates have offers or are getting interviews, if we tell a law firm, that this person's getting other interviews and has other offers, but they really like you or whatever, all of a sudden the law firm their ears will perk up and they will say, this is something where we're interested in this person. We really like to talk to them. We bring them back or whatever, or they'll interview them. So that happens a lot. So everyone's more attractive when other people like them. It's like that with dating, probably with a lot of things. I was in a car dealership, I remember a few years ago, and someone saw I was buying a car and they came up and they're like, oh, I want this car. They were looking at it before me and they saw me buying it. Oh, I really want it. So anything that if someone else likes it or someone else is getting it, people will like you a lot more. So that's just how it works. So you need to put yourself, you need to look, if you can, talk about that you have other interviews and offers. And if they ask you if the other firm offers you a position, that's not really appropriate for them to ask or what they offer. But if they do, just say, if they don't, just say, I decided I wasn't interested in them because of this or whatever. I didn't think it was a good fit because of this reason. And you don't need to say that they offered you something else or call them and tell them about the other offer. I don't think that's a good strategy. Okay. Here's a good question from someone, and I'm not going to use their name. But yeah, so if they ask for your interviewing, then they want to know if you get another offer. You shouldn't be telling them about the terms of the offer because that's violating the confidence of the person that made you the offer. So I would be very careful about not talking about the offer or the terms because it violates the confidentiality of the employer. So the other thing too is a lot of times, and this I shouldn't tell you, but it's true, in your own firm, there may be, wherever you're working, there may be people that are making more or less money than you at the same class year because of something that they've negotiated and that doesn't apply to you. I remember I was working at a firm once and there was this very accomplished woman that they wanted to make partner, but it was only like a fourth or fifth year. And they wanted her to stick around. And she said something along the lines of, okay, I will, but I only want to work 1,500 hours a year. And I want you to guarantee I'm going to be a partner. Other people in the firm found out about that. They shouldn't have. And it created a lot of, think about that. Someone's guaranteed to be a partner and they have lower hours than the people that are billing 3,000 hours that may not even make partner. That's not good news. So you need to be very careful about anything you do that's disclosing that kind of information. Here's a great question. I had to sue my employer who did not pay me for 3 months. It started after I told them I was pregnant. They eventually fired me at the end of 3 months. 2 years after negotiation, had to sue him, and the record pops up first when searching my name. How do I explain a positive interview? In that particular case, that sounds pretty horrible. What I would recommend doing is just actually being honest about it and saying what happened. I don't think anybody reasonably would not sympathize with you and think that this was outrageous. It's not like suing someone because you think that they discriminated against you because you were from a certain city or something. I don't know, but this is not that bad. I think here, you don't want to talk about being pregnant and that was when it happened. I think you basically said they didn't pay you for 3 months and, that I wanted to get paid and I support my family or whatever. And yeah, that's something you can talk about. Now, there is something else that you can do. I'm not going to get too far into it. Everyone, by the way, most people have if you think about politicians or people say good things about them and bad. So there's bad articles about them and good. And people like to read bad things. So anyone's in the public light is always going to have people attacking them. But reverse SEO is basically you register yourself for a bunch of social media sites or whatever. And then you point links toward them and point links to them and then make them rise in the search engines. That's called reverse SEO. And you could do things like that if you're really concerned about it. I know I have a friend of mine that was a U.S. attorney and went in Utah and went to a bar and drank 4 or 5 beers and was pulled over and given a DUI, and it was all over the news. And so he had a very hard time for a long time getting the position after being fired from his dream job. And he did reverse SEO. So now he hired someone to do it for him. Now you search his name, and lo and behold, none of that comes up, but still, it's not good. Okay, I've been home raising 3 kids after working full-time in a boutique firm for 8 years. What mistakes should I avoid and how can I emphasize I can learn fast? Okay, so this is very common, by the way. Lots of women have children and then come back to the workforce. It's very common. One firm that I thought one of the most unusual stories I ever heard, but Davis Polk had, I'm not going to tell you who the person was, but there was this woman that had stopped working there as a second-year associate, had raised 3 children. When the last one turned 18, asked if she could come back, and they said, sure. This is 22 years later or something. It was just awesome. What the heck? What a great firm. You got to hats off to Davis Polk. But the point is that the people very much respect women that go have kids and want to come back to the workforce. There's a bunch of reasons for that. One is that they know they're not going to leave to have kids again, but also they presume that they need to support their kids now because they need to put them through college and they need to start saving for retirement if they haven't been working. Law firms love it when moms come back. They get more interviews. They do well. And so I don't think that it's a problem at all. I would have in the past, I would have thought, oh, law firms don't like that. But in my experience, it's actually a positive thing. So I'll just list these reasons why law firms love it when moms come back. They will not have kids again, probably again. So they'll stick around, which is not a bad thing. I have to be very careful here. They will not have kids again. They will need to support kids. They won't have distractions. They will not have as many distractions. Meaning they're already married, already have kids, et cetera, whatever, et cetera. And again, I'm not taking sides here politically. I'm just saying these are some of the things that people could say. What else? They will not, sorry, just think about how to answer they will basically be thankful for the opportunity. There's tons of reasons why they like this, but it works. So I used to think it didn't, but now I think it actually benefits people that have done this. In my experience, they actually get more interviews than people not similarly situated. I'm assuming that these are some of the reasons. I don't know that these are all the reasons. I'm just putting myself in the shoes of a law firm. They also, I guess the big one you would say would be there's going to be presumed stability. Presumed stability means, and this is a big deal to law firms, presumed stability means house. They have a house, which means they have a house. They have a house or property. They have what else? Cars and friends, network, social network, all these things that mean that the person is established and they're unlikely to take off. That's the idea. And they're more likely to stay, and they're more likely to believe that. And by these messages, if you're a woman watching this, I'm just telling you, this is how it works when you come back. If you're, I don't know, but it kind of applies to everyone. And then you'll be grateful for the opportunity. So meaning for the opportunity, and therefore be more loyal, work harder, all that stuff. I just want everyone to understand the kind of the logic that goes into this and why it's a positive thing. So there's nothing really negative about it. It may be negative that you're older or whatever in your age, but at the same time, I think that this actually can work very well. Now, does it work for everyone? No, but it does work for a lot of people. I'm going to try to get to all these questions. There's still quite a few. I had an interview for a lateral position a few weeks ago at a big law firm. I have not heard back. What is the best way to follow up without seeming desperate? Should I wait until I have another job offer and tell them they are my first choice? I also was not asked for references. Should I follow up with information? So really the follow-up is a lot of times firms won't. Big firms or will not. Big firms. So what's going on? Let's talk about that. So what's going on? This is something that people should understand. When you do not hear from a firm, after an interview. So what does that mean? So it could mean a lot of things. It could mean made another offer, waiting, which happens a lot of the time. It means no one has met to discuss you or no approval for hiring you. It can mean that still interviewing people. It could mean business is slow and waiting to see if it picks up. So who knows? It could be a bunch of things. And so it's nothing that you can really be too concerned about when you don't hear from someone after an interview. That's just what's going on. So you need to be very careful about how you follow up, and because you don't really know what's going on. So what do you do? What's the best way to follow up? You can say, people that follow up, you don't want to appear desperate, but at the same time, you want to make sure that the law firm knows that you are interested in them still. So what would a follow-up look like if you want to do that? So follow-up might be something along the lines of, I just wanted to drop you a short note. I'm just telling you what I would do if you really want. Drop you a short note to tell you how much I enjoyed speaking with you. And I understand maybe moving, I don't know, maybe I understand you may, you have not made a decision, but I don't know, it's something very short, as all I'm saying. I just want to drive showing how much I enjoy meeting with you. I'm hoping for mutual and look forward to discussing, or I don't know, to meeting with you in the future. I don't know, to speaking, to look forward to learning more, hearing more. I don't know, to hearing back from you or something very short, and then you just sign your name. So it doesn't have to be a long email. You can just send something like that, and that's probably enough if you want. But the idea is, when someone's working for you, when you're trying to have someone hire you, you don't necessarily want to be, you don't want to act desperate because they want to feel like they're doing the chase, like they're chasing you, like you're in demand, like they have to get you now instead of in the future, like all those sorts of things. So it's just imagine dating. Does it make sense to I don't know, if a woman meets a man and she likes him, to send an email saying, I just wanted you to know how much I enjoyed meeting you? I guess you could do that. Would a man like that? He would probably think, no, whatever. I don't know. But you need to have a little bit of a chase going on here. So however you can maintain that is the best. But if someone's not getting back to you, I think you're better off interviewing with a place that really wants you and likes you, and where you may be the first choice. So that's something to be quite aware of. That's important for there to be some sort of chase. It's that the firm's doing that you're a hot commodity, and they're lucky to get you. Just like the whole example that I've given earlier is when you're trying to get hired by when you're an attorney, your job is to act like you're in front of, I don't know, but your job is to represent yourself and your client. So you want your client to be strong. You want to make your client look like the strongest person. So you don't look that way, then that's a problem. I think this is a very good question, because I'm just trying to think. I want to give you the best answer to this. And I want to tell you about some experiences that I've had with people that are very good at that. So I've interviewed some very strong people to work with me before, that essentially the kind of people that were so good that they would come in and act like they wanted to be my partner and could achieve that. And those sorts of people, somehow, I don't know how they did it, but they came in and they established a dialogue with me right away, where I was comfortable taking calls with them, and so I don't know that a young associate can do that with a law firm, but the more you're able to connect and get on a personal basis with someone somehow, or with the recruiting personnel or whatever, then the better off you're going to be. But if you start looking desperate, then that's going to hurt you. But having a connection where you look like you have lots of options and you'd like to is important. So I hope that answers things. But I can just tell you that some of the most powerful or strongest people I've ever interviewed were able to establish a dialogue with me, call me on the phone. It was perfectly fine, and all that sort of stuff. So I just, if you can do it, that's amazing. But most people can't. And I've seen very talented associates be able to do the same thing with a law firm. Like, they come in and they're just like, they talk about all the value they can provide. They connect with a partner. They look like they're going to, and then somehow they're on this dialogue. Now, most people aren't. But if you get to that stage, then that's the way to follow up, I guess, is one, as a big boy, I guess is a good way to put it, instead of or big girl instead of, I don't know. I hope that's a good answer. It gives you a little bit of detail about how it's done. Okay, if you're leaving a firm because it's slow, is it okay to say so in your next interview? Yeah, it is actually. If a law firm is slow and doesn't have enough work, you can talk about how they've lost people in this practice area, that if things are slow, that you wanted to, you wouldn't be concerned normally, but that this is some of their biggest clients or whatever. And so you can say that, but I want to be very clear about a couple of things that are important. The best people during most recessions, not and slowdowns in work. So there's a slowdown right now in real estate. There's a slowdown in corporate. Most people that are very talented and are able, that are, I don't know what the word is, but the best people in most law firms, when it gets slow, the law firm will hold on to them because they know the person is good and they know they've made money from them in the past. And they can continue to make money. They don't have to train someone to get them up to speed. The person's nice and gets along well with people. And why would they get rid of them? So that's how law firms think. So if a law firm is letting you go, many times the people they will let go when things slow down are young associates because they haven't been trained. So there's not a lot of worth to them yet. They'll let young associates go, or they'll let senior associates that don't have whatever, that they don't want to keep around, or they'll let people go that have a bad attitude. So that's one of the reasons I talk about attitude and things, or people that aren't working hard. So they'll keep the most valuable people around. If you are able to stay in firms through slow periods, typically the law firm will reassure you, they'll tell you things. You should have relationships with partners and you can use, you should have a network. But if it's slow, people are getting laid off, there's nothing you can do, that it doesn't matter, and the firm's slow, then you should basically, you can talk about that. You'd be better off talking about how you want to go to the firm for other reasons, because it's not going to make it look like that you'll do the same thing to them, because every firm gets slow. So you need to figure out the best way to approach that. So my feeling is you can say the work is slow if you want in a next interview. But if you say that, the firm you're interviewing with is going to say, things get slow here too. So what's this person going to do if things get slow? So often you're better off of trying to portray things, and you're trying to move up. The firm does more of the type of work that you want, all those sorts of things. So if you can do that effectively, you're going to be much better off in the long run. Okay, this is a good in terms of getting a job. So always try to present yourself as someone that's awesome, and you're moving to this firm because they're even more awesome, and they do exactly what you want to do and you weren't doing that before. That's a much better answer than saying it's slow and I might lose my job, because you're basically, if you say that, you're showing that you could be disloyal when work slows down there, and you're also showing that you're not getting work, you're not valued, and so you need to really be careful about that. And that's how I would say. So yes, you can say it. It's okay to say it, but it's better off to do something else. Okay, I work in the venture capital space. I have 3.5 years of experience. I'm trying to look for a new job. What are the best practice to look for a job, especially during November, December? Please note, I have not worked in a large firm. Okay, so actually November, December, believe it or not, are some of the best months to look for a job. There's an article on BCG called Why November. Let me even see if I can pull it up here real quick. Sure, I'm showing him his name. Give me 1 second. So why BCG search, why November? This is fun because this is a good question. It's right up my alley. December are the best months. Look at this. This is fun. Right here. So January is when everyone else is looking for a job. If everyone else is doing the same thing, you're going to be more likely there's will be more competition, but in January, lots of people are applying. This is the article right here. I think this will answer your question pretty well, but actually in my experience, November and December are absolutely, what happened there? No, are absolutely some of the best months to look for a job. So if you look for jobs in November, December, the benefit of that time is, and I just know what the heck this article is called, but I'll just cut and paste it because I don't have the URL because it's in the search engine. but this is the article. So if you look for a job in November, December, the benefit of it is that there's fewer people looking for jobs. So everyone in the firm is just getting fewer applications. There's not, and so your resume will rise to the top of the pile because hardly anybody's applying, and especially if the firm has openings. So that's the thing. Now, there's another kind of secret that this is worth price of admission to any like webinar if there was one. But one of the secrets is it's always better to interview on Fridays, especially in the afternoon. And it's also always better to interview in November, December. And why is that better November, December? So the first reason is in November and December, there's just fewer applicants. So you have a much better chance of getting a job. Also, the law firm doesn't have to hire in January. So people love that. If the law firm has openings, they know people are going to leave in January because everyone is getting a bonus and all this sort of thing. So if you start looking for a position in November and December, you're going to be one of the only people, and the law firm's not going to have to worry about hiring someone then. They're already going to have someone in place. There's people that they think are going to leave. So that's great. Now, why is it another reason? So on Fridays, if you interview, everyone is less critical than they normally are during Monday or Tuesday when they've sharpened their sword by getting some rest over the weekend. They're ready to go. So people that interview on Mondays tend to get fewer jobs, and people that interview on Thursdays, people on Tuesdays, same thing. But Fridays, for some reason, you have a much better chance of getting a job because people are in a better mood. They're less critical. Maybe they went out on Thursday night, who knows? But they're not going to sit there and drill you with the same level of, it's just different. They're excited about the weekend. They're in a better mood. And the same thing happens with November and December. Like people have done things with their family. They're excited. They're all this sort of stuff. And so you also tend to do better in November and December for that reason. I believe that, and again, I've written a freaking article about it. I believe that this is really the most important thing it's one of the most important times of the year to search for jobs. Why wouldn't you want to search for a position when no one else is? Come on, it's huge. This is when you can move to bigger firms. It's when you can move. So you can apply to bigger firms than you're working at. You can, it doesn't matter. Now, this particular person saying you worked in the ECVC space. One of the things I would say about what's nice about corporate law is it's actually much easier, especially if you're doing this sort of stuff, to move to a big firm from a smaller firm than is in a lot of other practice areas, because it's a very specialized practice area. There's not a lot of people that do it. The firms, when they need people in that practice area, will often have a difficult time recruiting, so they will be willing to look at people from smaller firms, all that sort of thing. There is a little bit of difference sometimes the size of the deals, but it can be very helpful to often come from other types of things. Someone said, will this recording be available? Yes, but what happens to the Q&A is it may be chopped up and you may not be able to find that. So anybody that's watching this, you may not be hard to see this again. Now, the main webinar, you'll be able to, though. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so this is a good question. And by the way, I love these questions that people are asking. They're very helpful. So I've made the mistake of asking about the companies or law firms benefits early in the interview, which may have given the impression I'm primarily interested in compensation. How can I approach compensation and benefits discussions more strategically? You ask about this after you get an offer. That's it. You ask about it after you get an offer. So you don't ask about it early on, only after you get an offer. It's absolutely not something you should ever talk about early in the interview. So sometimes people will say, what is your healthcare like? My child has a horrible health. People do this sort of stuff. And again, you need to be very careful. You don't ask about this stuff before you got an offer. That's too assumptive. And again, I'm not criticizing someone for saying that their child has a problem and asking about an interview, but it's just you ask about it after you get an offer. That's it. So you don't ask about it beforehand, but you ask about it after. You don't ask about compensation. You don't ask about benefits. You don't ask about parking. You don't ask about vacations. You don't ask about any of this stuff in an interview. It's like the last thing in the world that you should be asking about. So you wait till you get an offer. That's it. That's the only rule you need to follow. You don't ask about money, benefits, policies, anything until you get an offer. Now, after you get an offer, the person decided they want you. They're going to be nice, and that's important to understand. So, okay, here's another good question. I love it when people ask long questions, by the way, because I think it's important to think about all these things. And I will get to your question if I haven't answered yet. There's a lot of questions, but I'll get to it. Okay, I'm struggling how to frame reasons for moving without sounding negative. It seems like on the one hand, I don't want to be overly negative. However, on the other, it seems like we still have to present reasons that give an inference of negativity about the former employer. Not enough opportunity, not a cultural fit, want something more. All of these imply that the law firm had some inadequacy. Is there just a way to just frame things honestly? If it was not a good fit, maybe couching the things that you liked about the firm. I'm conducting a job search after losing a position in a very unstable branch office. Your example of working for a tyrant. I want to explain this in a way that will not hamper my search efforts. How can we strike the right balance between good reasons for basically saying why you left and are looking for new reasons, or is it better just to make mistakes? How can we make mistakes as a young attorney that may have led to a lost position without looking bad? That's a good question. One of the things I think that's interesting about that question is this person is basically feels like they need to say they lost a position, and that may be true. You may have lost a position. What's interesting, I was talking to someone that I think booked a paid call with me or something, but I was talking to them just without the free call, and I talked to them for free because they hadn't. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And it was a person that was a head of a law firm, and he was saying, I never like to let people go because I know it's going to hurt them and make it difficult for them to get jobs. Law firms that let people go when they don't have jobs, it can be very bad. So here, this person was in an unstable branch office. So that's actually how I might frame it. So I would just say it was a branch office. They were having a lot of problems. This are things you can say. Most of their work was coming from the main office, and they just were losing people. They didn't have a lot of work. And so you can sometimes talk about things that way. You can say it was a great firm. I went to it for this reason. I got this experience. I really don't have anything bad to say about it. But I did learn that branch offices are unstable. And you could talk about a few examples. This person left. They weren't getting work. They had to return it on the other office for work. And it was a difficult place to remain. So you don't have to basically say anything bad about the firm or even say you got fired. You can just basically talk about sometimes that I learned that branch offices can be difficult there, something along those lines. You have to figure out how to couch it in a way that doesn't make you look bad, but I would basically say that it was a problematic office. I didn't learn how I didn't learn how they got work. Something along those lines that makes it seem like you learned a lesson about working in branch offices and that they're not all the best, or something along those lines. But you don't necessarily have to say you were fired. You can just say there were some issues there, but I really liked the firm and they were good people and I got a good experience and it's a great firm and I have nothing negative to say about them. I don't think that might be one way to answer it too. If they ask you say, I have nothing negative to say about the firm and there's a lot of things I liked about it. The only thing I will say is that I learned that branch offices can often be very difficult places to work for a variety of reasons that I don't know that's important to get into, but that I definitely wouldn't want to work in a firm like this compared to something along those lines. So you need to just be careful in terms of how you couch things and that can help you. So just again, think about how you would answer a judge on behalf of your client. Why did your client run? What happened? And they would have to answer that in a way that would to make things look more positive. So just think about that, how you would do that. Okay. In the past, I have asked questions about work-life balance and remote work options during interviews. Could these inquiries be interpreted as a lack of commitment to the job? How can I frame such questions possibly? Absolutely not. So under no circumstances whatsoever no circumstances whatsoever should you ask about work-life balance or remote work options during an interview. Absolutely not. So you just don't ask it. It's the dumbest thing you can do during an interview. Absolutely not. You do not want to ask it. It will make it so you do not get a job. So that is one of the, and I'm sorry to be so direct here, but people that do that typically will not get jobs. I had one major law firm in Dallas, Texas, that someone had a Dallas, Texas address on their resume, had a apartment or whatever in Dallas, Texas, but was working for another law firm in Dallas, Texas, remotely from, I don't know, San Francisco or something, I don't know where it was, but some other state. The law firm found out that they were working remotely and made them an offer, and then found out that the person had been living in San Francisco and working remotely for this other big Dallas firm and pulled the offer. It was like, no, you're done. That was it. So think about that. So if you go and they pulled an offer because of that, asking about work-life balance or remote work options, unless the firm is paying is a big firm and I'm paying significantly less money than a large firm or something, no way. Who would you hire? Someone that wants to work remotely and is concerned about work-life balance, or someone that wants to work hard and get ahead? Geez, just think about it. Now, you can ask all this stuff after you get an offer. That's the time to bring it up if it's important to you and you think that you want to ask it, but no, you don't ask that. And again, I realize that this sort of thinking is completely foreign to a lot of people that have grown up with this sort of expectation. And this is a newer type of thought process. But asking this stuff will just get you no employer, unless they have no other options to hire. Like maybe you went to Stanford Law School and you're interviewing with a bunch of people that went to top 100 or 200 law schools. I don't know. But no, you just don't ask this stuff. If you ask it, think about it. Most jobs, a lot of these big firm jobs get hundreds of applicants. So if they have hundreds of applicants, why would they hire someone that wants to know about work-life balance or remote work options? Is that prejudice? I don't know. If you wanted to hire someone to work and, I don't know, to take care of your kids or something while you're at work, if one person came in and said, hey, is it okay if instead of being at your house, I take your kids to, I don't know, to my father-in-law's house 2 days a week because I want to, they do gardening or something. I want to garden with them. I don't know, like something like that. Or they say, is it okay if, I don't know, that I take, it's just anything that would be not what you'd expect or want from the job. You're not going to hire the person. You wouldn't. So if you ask about this stuff and you think it's okay, it's not. And I want to be very direct with everyone that you just don't ask these questions in an interview. You ask about them after you get a job. Now, if that's important to you and you have a lot of places you can work, then do it. That's absolutely fine. I want to tell a quick story. I had a guy working for me once that went to the University of Texas Law School and was in the top 3 graduates of his class. And the only reason he knew that was because there was some award that was given to top 3 students because they didn't want to make a valedictorian or whatever it's called. So that's what they gave him. So he never worked in a law firm during his summer. He never interviewed with a law firm during his 3rd year. And then he came to work for me and was basically, his demands were, after he'd been hired and was working and came in, that he be allowed to leave the job early at 2 and work on his laptop, that but he needed work-life balance. He wasn't going to work on all these demands, and it didn't work out. And he also knew that if he worked that sort of way, that he would have to do that in a law firm. So that's why he didn't go to work in a large law firm or any law firm. So you can ask about that stuff. Certain law firms do like that, but you just have to understand, who would you hire? If you had someone working for you, would you hire someone that was really concerned about that and it impacted your ability to get the work done, or would you hire someone that wasn't like that? Okay, so this is interesting. These are great questions. I appreciate all these questions. I noticed that some interviewers encourage candidates to share challenges they faced with their previous employers. How can I effectively navigate such questions without appearing negative about my former employer? Okay, so those are easy questions. These are all very easy questions. You don't have to say challenges that were negative about the employer. You just have to come up with kind of challenges that make it seem positive. Is if challenges were senior associates got more responsibility on the deals. I would have liked to have been able to bring in business, but the firm's billing rates and the requirements for the size of clients are too high. I would have liked to have been able to get into court more, but the partners all did it. I would have liked to have been able to, I don't know, write more, take more lead on deals, or I don't know, but things that show you're aggressive and interested in practicing and want more responsibility and are enthusiastic and growing, and or maybe or whatever, like you want to do better and you want more responsibility, you want more hours. Maybe the challenges were the firm wanted to work more hours and there just wasn't enough work going around. Anything that sounds positive, that makes you seem like you're trying to grow and be really good at your job, is very important. The more of that you do, the better you're going to be. So you take everything in terms of the challenges and you frame them as positives. And that's my advice. So let's hear. What resources or templates would you recommend using for reaching out to law firms without openings? What is the best way to reach out? Okay, so this is actually a very good question, and I will answer it. I don't know what the percentage is now, but years ago, I looked at these percentages, and it was something crazy. It was like 85% of candidates, and this is crazy. And so this statistic I'm sharing with you, by the way, should blow you away. So this is something that, again, if you learn this right now, it's going to change the course of your freaking career. And no one even understands this, but I do, because I've worked with tens of thousands of attorneys, and there's no one else that does what I do like this. And it freaks people out, all sorts of things. So 85% of candidates that BCG, now in the past, I haven't looked at this in the past few years, so I'm not going to say it's 85 now, it might be lower, but in the past that have gotten positions with us. And this statistic should blow you away. It's incredible with us. Now, again, I'm not saying this statistic's current, but I'm sure it's a lot. It's probably still way over 50% have gotten positions with firms that don't have openings. Now, so because this statistic should blow you away, but I want to preface this with a couple of different statements, because I want to make sure you understand why this is. So certain firms always interview people through BCG, or firms interview lots of candidates in different practice areas, regardless if they have an opening. So we're using historical information. We're using not AI, but we're using different machine learning and algorithms and things. So this is our statistics. I'm not saying like these are very high because of things that we're doing to make these decisions about where to tell people. And then here's the other thing is 75% of candidates, when we send them list of firms to approve, get freaked out. So they think that we're spamming them or something. List of firms get freaked out. So meaning they think there's something wrong with this, that why would we be sending them these firms? We do it because we know the places that are likely to interview them without openings, but I'd also do it because I know that's where people are likely to get jobs. Because here's the kicker, and I want to make sure everyone understands this, because this is incredibly freaking important. It may be one of the most important job search things you hear in your entire career. And I want to make sure everyone understands this. Firms without openings. Now, large firms, by the way, I'm talking more about small to mid-sized firms. Big firms in big cities are run like machines, and they know exactly what they need, and often are inflexible. But firms without openings, if they receive your application, and again, this large firms in hot markets and hot practice areas, this is the case. But if you apply to a firm without openings, apply to a firm without formal openings, you are the only applicant, right? So you're the only applicant. So if you're the only applicant, that the firm, no one to compare you to, right? No one to compare you to, easy to hire because no one applies to firms like that. It's easy. They obviously, you're interested in them. You know about them. You're not applying just because there's a job. And what does no one to compare you with? This means no competition. No competition. For example, if I post an opening for in-house counsel at BCG, right? What's going to happen? Within a few minutes, I'm going to suddenly get, and this is just because this is the kind of competition there's for a lot of in-house jobs, I'll start getting, by the end of day two, I may have, 200 applications or something. So what am I going to do? How am I going to make any sense of all this? Well, I guess I could put them all in a pile and sort them by school. But this is what employers face. So if you're applying to an employer with a job, what are your odds? But if you're applying for a firm that doesn't have an opening, there's no competition. You're the only applicant, and you're proactively showing that you like the firm or the position. So that's great. You like the firm. So firms that receive applicants like this are like, that's awesome. Like, they love it. And you're much more likely to get a job. Again, these statistics at BCG are artificially high because if there's, 300 firms in Milwaukee, like we know like the 10 or 15 that always interview like corporate attorneys or patent attorneys, like even without jobs. So we send them those. And so that's one reason working with a good recruiter could change your life. But it's also, and again, I'm not trying to, but at the same time, you can do that on your own. You just won't have us be as accurate. But what's funny is when I send candidates these lists of firms, they think, oh, this is crazy. This recruiter is sending me all these firms. I'm going to stop responding to their text and emails and block them. This is how people think. But honestly, this is the most effective way to get a position. There are so many frickin' attorneys in every practice area all over the country that you could potentially go work for. It's ludicrous. So I'll just show you this example. So let's Google, and we'll look at, let's just take an example. Trust and estates attorneys. If you want to do trust and estates attorneys, let's pick something random, in Santa Fe, New Mexico, right? Santa Fe, New Mexico. So no one, by the way, is going to apply to these frickin' people. There are tons of them. So look at this. So here we go. Walk-in wills, Robert, all these places, they just go on for pages and pages. Look at this. Next. It's just, come on, just look at this. It's insane. If you want to work, there are so many attorneys out there that in law firms that no one's applying to, that if you apply to them, you have a great opportunity to get a position. All you need to do is apply and do a search on Google for whatever job you're trying to get or firm you're trying to work in. And by the way, these kind of particular searches, which I think are freaking awesome, are hugely effective. Let me just fix something here. I'm going to fix so I can show this. Anyway, this particular search, look, $2.2 million. Anyway, I'll just show this. But the point is that if you apply to firms without openings, you are going to have a massive opportunity to get positions that no one does. I've seen this with myself. An example would be, I used to, up till a couple of years ago, I had a law firm. Now, I didn't have a law firm where I was representing people. I had a law firm that was representing my companies and things that we were involved in, whatever, not serious things. But if someone owed us money or was using our trademark or whatever, we would this law firm. But the point is that in the entire history of having this law firm, which was years and years, I only had a couple people, I can remember them, walk in, or the ones that walked in were the most effective, but send their resume out of the blue saying, hey, do you have any opportunities? And the ones that did, would all get jobs. I'll tell you a quick story that blows my mind. And this, I just want to tell you because I want to give you an example of how frickin' effective this is. So I used to have a company called Legal Authority, which you can see online. You can go to Legal Authority right now. And Legal Authority would basically, you could call Legal Authority and say, you'd fill out a form and you'd say, hey, I want to work at, and this company, the website's still up, but it's not, where no one's working on it at the moment, and hasn't been for years. But you go to this company, you'd say, you could be, and I'll tell you a quick story. There was a couple guys that were friends that went to Thomas Cooley Law School, which I guess is now called, I don't know what it's called, but it's something else. But it, for whatever reason, it's not a highly ranked law school. As a matter of fact, I think at the time it was one of the 10 worst in the country or something. I don't know. But, and again, nothing against people to go to Thomas Cooley, but there a couple of guys from there one day visited my office. One of them brought their father and was like, we can't thank you enough. We got these great jobs with entertainment law firms. And the dad was like, yeah, thank you so much. We can't believe what a great job you did. All Legal Authority would do is if you said, I want to be any type of attorney in any city, we would just search our database. And if you want to be an entertainment attorney in LA, we would search and then we'd find 200 law firms doing it. And then we would, at that time, we would print out letters and everything and send it to the people, and they would send it out to all these firms saying they want to be an entertainment attorney. We would do their resume and cover letter. But the point of this whole thing is that getting an entertainment job in LA, if you're an attorney at Morrison and Forrester or Melvin or one of these big for Gibson Dunn and want to do it, it's extremely difficult. It's beyond difficult. It's not impossible, but it's pretty freaking hard because everybody wants to do entertainment law. It doesn't matter if you went to Harvard, whatever. But these guys that went to this worst law school, one of the worst law schools in the country, as law students, were getting entertainment jobs using this service. It works. If you apply, and the point I'm making is this company was getting so many people jobs that it was ridiculous. So many people were getting positions with Legal Authority. It just blew my mind. And all they were doing was mass mailing their resume and with letters instead of sending, what do you call it, emails. And so it works. If you apply to places without openings, you're going to do well. Now, there is something now called that BCG does, which is called, what's it called? Reverse. And I'm sorry to give such a long, drawn out answer to this. BCG and search. So what is this called? BCG. And essentially, this is the same thing. This is reverse recruiting, which is basically a similar type service, but it's a little more high end because unfortunately the Legal Authority as a low end service was a difficult company to operate from both a profitability and a customer service perspective. But yeah, reverse recruiting is something that we do. But here's one other thing that I would recommend. And again, I'm not trying to plug my companies and things here, but I am trying to present my job search offerings. So anytime you use LinkedIn or what else, Indeed for jobs, everyone out there, every single person with an internet connection, single attorney with an internet connection is applying to those jobs. So what does that mean? That means that you stand very little chance of getting those jobs because, first of all, the employer may not even see your resume because there's so many freaking people applying to those jobs. And the second thing is that you don't stand a good chance of getting those positions because you're going to be competing with a huge number of people. Just think of how many law students and how many new attorneys are looking for jobs. So that's the problem. So I do have a company that does this and helps people other than this reverse recruiting. It's called Law Crossing, which you probably have heard of, but all Law Crossing does, it's a little different. It goes, the site goes and looks at every law firm website. Oh, and by the way, to get on Indeed or LinkedIn for jobs, employers need to pay. So that means that. But Law Crossing basically visits every law firm we can find, and every government office, all that, every government in-house, whatever, and then takes those jobs and posts them on its site. And those jobs, the majority of these are not advertised. So that's all. So you stand a better chance if a law firm has a job somewhere or a company that's not advertised, because if some municipality puts or government office or law firm in whatever, in a small or mid-sized law firm or even large law firm that doesn't advertise its jobs, has a job and it's not advertised, you stand a much better chance. I don't want to get too far into it, but that's the whole point of these. I'm not trying to tell you that you should do it, but people get, if the site works, you'll get I'm not going to say you'll get a job because that's ridiculous. But I think if you find positions like on Legal Authority Day, which you can do with reverse recruiting now, but it's expensive, so I don't even want to talk about it really, but it's there. But if you use something like Law Crossing, which is very expensive, you can find jobs that aren't advertised. If you do mass mailing on your own, or you just search the internet and find a list of firms doing your practice area and apply, you're going to get more jobs. So the whole idea is, if you're looking for a job, and I'm sorry again to talk so much about this, but this is my passion, and I have businesses doing it. But if you look for a job, well, if you try to get a position and there's no competition, what the hell? You're going to have 10 times a better chance. You're also going to look like you're interested in the employer when other people aren't necessarily doing that. Okay. So I hope that helps. Those are great questions. I really appreciate them. Okay, so let's see here. Next question. I've had interviews where I was asked about my preferred management style or type of leadership I work best with. How can I answer these questions without sounding like they'd be problematic employee? My preferences don't lie with a company culture. So this is a very simple answer to give. So if you're an associate, which you probably are asking this, this is what you say. This is a very simple question to answer. You say, I look at my job as an associate to be a soldier, and whomever I'm working for, be my general, whether it's a senior associate or whomever I am, client, partner, whatever. That's what you do. So you say, I want to be an associate. I look at my job as being an associate to be a soldier, and whoever I'm working for to be a general. That's it. So what does that mean? That means that your job is to follow orders and do the best you can for who's ever supervising you. That's your management style. That's a management style of a soldier. That's a management style that you need to come across as having. So your job is to basically say that I will work for you and be your soldier, and I don't really care who's giving me the orders. I'm going to do them the best I can. That's it. So your preferred management style says, my job is just to get along and do well wherever I am. And that's it. So I want to tell you a couple other quick stories. I've told these before, but the first recruiters I ever hired, one had been at her previous job for 8 years. The other had been there for 20 years. They came in to work in BCG. The first one stayed like 9 years or whatever, and the next one stayed until she retired, which was like 15 or 16 years. So people go into people that are good go into different companies and businesses or law firms, and they are able to acclimate to whatever the culture is. So when those person with 8 years and the one with 20 years started, it was a young company where I didn't know what I was doing managing people. It was growing very fast, and they were able to move from working in a company that was fast growing to one that became established, and then one that, of course, ran into different bumps and things along the way, as all companies do, where things were positive, things were negative. So at the same time that they were there, we had 20, 30 recruiters come in and work for 2 years or 1 year or 3 years or 5 years, because all those people that came in and worked like that had also done the same thing with their careers in working for before I hired them. So if I hired someone that had been their last job for a year, they almost always lasted a year. If I hired someone that had been their last job 3 years, they always lasted like 2 to 4 years. So it's just that's how people are. So if you think about it that way, just say, the other thing you could say is, my parents worked at his job or her job for 25 years. That's how I work. This is how everyone in my family is. You have to give people the impression that your interest is in following direction and doing what people and getting along whatever environment you're at. I hope that answer is helpful. I think it answers your question. It's a great question. Okay, I work in a small market with a lot of boutique in the same practice area where everyone seems to know each other. I lost my position and searching for a new one, but I'm worried that I will either be blackballed, or the fact that one firm in the market laid me off will preclude other firms from hiring me. asked a few prior questions in the same webinar. My apologies in advance for any redundancy. Okay, so the answer to that is no, you can't worry about it. You cannot worry about it. And you just need to go and apply to every single one of those firms. So apply everywhere. That's it. I don't know what the market is, but you apply everywhere. Don't worry about it. The point of the matter is, as I said this earlier, 30% of the people that know you, 30% of people will like you. Like you. 30% don't care. Well, it's actually 1/3. So there's 33, whatever. 33% don't care. And then 33% will like you, right? It will not like you. Percent will not like you. So it's the same thing with attorneys. 33% of the people in that market may like the attorney you work for. 33% won't like them. 33% won't care. It's ridiculous, and it's not true to think that everyone talks to each other. So if you were in a class at school and you graduated with 40 people, you wouldn't 33% that you probably dislike, 30%, all these sorts of things. So you don't want to assume that all those people will talk to each other. The other thing is and this is actually very important to understand. So this is something for any attorney that's ever worried about being blackballed, for any attorney that is fearful about this stuff, it's very important to understand. Very important. So most attorneys, there's an understanding in the legal market that is followed more by large law firms and smaller markets, but it's very important to understand, it's there, is that attorneys do not talk negatively about people that have worked for them, or that's it. So they do not talk negatively about people that have worked for them. So they just don't. If they do that, then it makes the attorney that's talking about the person negatively look bad. You want the good firms, the best firms, people leave there and good things happen to them. It's a statement of the quality of the firm if good things are happening to the people that leave. It's not a good statement of the quality of the firm if the firm just says how bad people are and hates them, because why would anybody, that's not good. In larger markets and larger firms and the more prestigious firms, this is less pronounced, but this also happens in a lot of even smaller markets. So I just want to tell you a quick story about something that I thought really showed me this. Attorneys that I know are very careful about saying negative things about other attorneys when they lose jobs. So that's one thing to understand. The other thing, I just wanted to tell you a quick story. There was a woman once that I was working with, and I said, what happened at your firm? And I think she had been at Simpson Thacher or something, a very prestigious firm. I'm not saying it was Simpson Thacher, but it might have been, but it was something. Anyway, so I said, what happened at your previous firm? And she said something like, I had a psychotic break and I was acting crazy. I took off my clothes and ran through the halls. It wasn't that bad, but it was something along those lines. And the firm was very understanding. I went to a psychiatric hospital for 3 weeks, and then I came back and I was medicated and I thought everything was under control. But then I had another psychotic break and I threw a pot of coffee in a partner's face or something. And literally something that was like that bad. I couldn't believe it. And she said, but I have good references. And I said, oh, great. And so I called these references at this very prestigious New York firm. And they were like, oh, she was great. We loved her. She's nothing negative to say about her. I think she's going to make a fine attorney. And wow, but I knew something completely different. So what does that mean? That means that the best law firms, the best places to work will never say something negative about the people that leave or they have problems with, even in almost the most dire of circumstances, because lawyers are expected to have other lawyers' backs. And that's just how it works. People that don't do that, it's problematical. Everyone does not know each other in whatever market you're in. And many times that the fact that a firm laid you off is a bad sign of them. You can say they didn't have the work, or there wasn't enough work, or there was some issue or whatever. But you can, most of the time, if it's a small market, people will be happy to hear that there were issues at the other firm. So I would really, be honest with you, I wouldn't worry about it. And I would think that any firm that's going to talk negatively about you is actually making themselves look worse. And it's actually bad on them. So I personally, if that was me, I wouldn't worry too much about it. I would just apply to a lot of places. And then the nice thing is when you lose a job, everyone's talking about losing jobs today. When you lose a job, you can just go back to your next job and learn with all those lessons, just be 10 times better attorney. So you learn what's important and what you can't do wrong. And then instead of having sour grapes, that's what you should do. So that's my opinion. I am a younger lawyer without good references after I lost my position within a short period of time. A lot of those same questions, but I'm going to answer this. The first job was a small firm that eliminated my practice area. That's too bad. The second was in a volatile branch office, and I was fired when I mistakenly missed a deadline. Okay, let me just write the underline. I just want to make sure I understand this. The second was in a volatile and was fired when I mistakenly missed a deadline. That sucks. Okay. Let me just start in the beginning. So I'm a younger lawyer without good references after I lost my position at two firms within a short period of time. The first job was a small firm that eliminated my practice area. The second was in a volatile branch office, and I was fired after mistakenly missing a deadline. The last experience was extremely distressing. The firm was spiteful, laid me off without severance, gave no regard for my prior work, and even though I was able to get the deadline excused, held it against me in the harshest possible way. I was only at the firm 6 months and now need a new job, but have few references I can trust. I'm worried this firm blackballed me. My questions are, can I find a new position without a glowing reference from supervisors? What kind of employers are more likely to hire without references? Okay, so that's a great question. That, by the way, people get fired as junior attorneys all the time for missing deadlines. I just want to say something that may make you feel a little bit better. When you miss a deadline, it's first of all, it's the partner's responsibility to supervise you and make sure that doesn't happen, or a senior associate. You can't possibly be able to understand all these deadlines and juggle all this many times as a junior attorney. It's not a good thing when that happens, but missing a deadline is definitely something that a lot of people get fired for, especially junior attorneys, even senior attorneys. And you're not really getting fired for missing the deadline so much because almost every attorney out there has missed deadlines. What you're getting fired for is you're getting fired because the partners are trying to cover their ass with a client or each other. Who knows? But you can't worry about it. So the firm was spiteful, laid you off without severance, gave no regard to your prior work, and even though you were able to get the deadline excused. So yeah, so a lot of times these deadlines, things, the court's always going to be understanding. There's motions and things you can do to get it excused, but you don't need necessarily to have references or worried about the firm blackballing you. You may have had a bad experience there. You can, if you need to, you could always say you missed a deadline. But yes, you can find a new position without glowing references. And what kind of employers are most likely to hire you without references? Okay, so this is a very simple answer, and I'm glad this is being asked because it's a very important question. So law firms are businesses. So what does that mean? So they need people to do the work. So that's it. So they lose money if work's not getting done. So they lose money if work's not getting done. So all you need to do is find places that need work done, work not being done. So I'm just typing this out, work not being done. So that's it. So you just need to make sure that you find a firm that needs work. What does that mean? It may mean that you need to go to a smaller firm. It may mean you need to find a firm that's extremely busy. It can mean all sorts of things. So I saw something that was just hilarious early in my career. There was this woman that had gone to University of, Minnesota Law School or something, had been on law review, which does it mean a lot? Yes. Some places you need to have the top grades. I think that's what it was like when I went to law school. Maybe they have 15 places and 13 are for people with grades and 2 are for writing. I don't know what it was, but it was something like that. And so some schools, law review is based on grades. Other schools, they just have these things where you can write up why you're special because you grew up poor, or whatever, and you'll get on that way. But anyway, so this woman went to University of Minnesota and was on law review, but graduated with a C- average or something just horrible. And then somehow got a clerkship on the 6th Circuit or 9th Circuit Court of Appeals and then had something else. Maybe it was I don't know if she worked for the Supreme Court, but something just incredible in her background. She got an interview with the job with one of the most prestigious law firms in the country. Like when I say prestigious, it was like one of the top 5 hardest firms to freaking get a job in, probably in the country. They never looked at her grades. And then when I moved her to another firm, it was a huge firm, like a very prestigious firm in Silicon Valley, like one of the top probably 5 most prestigious. They never looked at her grades. So what is the point to all that? The point is that not necessarily they didn't look at her grades, but the point is that people hire people for business reasons. This woman looked at on paper. They didn't think of anything. And both those firms hired her and she did fine, even though she had bad grades. So my point to you is that employers hire people if they can make money. And if the work's not being done, they lose money. So all you need to do is find firms that will hire you. You can apply to a lot of places. If they have a lot of work that needs to be done, apply to places without jobs, they will hire you. People realize that mistakes happen. If you need to get into detail about what happened, you can tell them and they may feel sorry for you. But most of the time you need to perceive yourself as very strong. So the first job, the eliminate your practice area, you can absolutely 100% say that in your interviews. The second job, you can say, if it comes down to it, you can say, there was an issue that happened with a matter where a partner looked bad and I took the fall. You can say all sorts of things, but you have to be very careful and you have to think through it. And I'm not going to tell you exactly how to do that. But the fact that all this stuff happened and that you fixed it is good, but you basically need to move on. You may need to apply to smaller firms. You may need to apply to firms that don't currently have any, that don't have openings, all that sort of stuff. And if you're able to do that, you're going to have a much better chance of getting a position. Okay, just give me 1 second. All I'm doing is at this point is I'm going to grab a Diet Coke, and just give me 1 second and I will come back and answer this next question, which actually looks pretty awesome. I'm excited to answer. And I'm trying to be respectful of everyone that's asked questions and try to answer all these, even though this has been going on it's a fairly long webinar, but we'll get through all the questions. Okay. Yeah, it was funny. I was talking to someone, I don't know, I think it was my fiance, and she somehow got in my Instagram. I think it was Instagram. No. Yeah, it might have been Instagram channel. And she's like, why are you drinking all these Diet Cokes during these videos? And I thought that was funny because she said it doesn't look good, but whatever. Enjoy it. Okay. Let's see. I'm a junior lawyer who lost a position in a boutique firm. Okay. After just 6 months, I've been getting great reviews and billing lots of hours. The last month, I got stretched too thin. I failed to catch a partner's mistake on a deadline. The partner, who was working remotely from another office, threw me under the bus. My branch office manager did not stick up for me, and I lost my position. There were a lot of great things I liked about the job. I liked the work. I liked working in a national boutique, and I liked some of my bosses, but there were things that did not. Partners did not have time for training associates. Most of my time was spent working for partners at other offices. The branch was slow, volatile personalities, and the partners in my home office were obviously remote, so there was little opportunity for FaceTime. How can I frame my new job search in the best possible light? Do I admit that I was fired? And what questions do I need to ask myself to move forward? Okay, so this is interesting, by the way. I want to just bring up a quick point. Now, this is very similar to a lot of questions, so I'm going to refer to some of the other stuff, the other questions there. But what's interesting about this question is a lot of these are about branch offices. Think about it. Branch offices having problems, branch offices getting work from other offices, branch offices this, branch offices that. And it's interesting. There are branch offices of major firms all over the country that have never made a partner because you're not around the people that have the power to do it. A lot of times branch offices are open because there's 1 or 2 clients there and they want to have a presence, and then they hire people and there's no work. So branch offices can be very volatile places to work. It doesn't mean they all are. Most of them, if you take a great law firm like Latham & Watkins, they're freaking awesome. They have great branch offices. Or you take a firm like Quinn Emanuel, their New York office is awesome, and they're based in LA. So the point is a lot of branch offices are very good, but a lot of them are bad. So it is an important consideration for attorneys when you go to work to be very careful with branch offices. It can hurt you, and you need to be careful, because you may have limited opportunities to advance. You may have less work, all these things. Okay, so this particular question that you're talking about with your people losing positions, or you losing positions because you made a mistake. Again, this is the second person that's talked about having made a bad error and gotten fired. So again, this happens all the time. It shouldn't happen, by the way. It should be the partner's responsibility most of the time to catch this stuff, but whatever. That's because they're the ones that are ultimately accountable. So I think, again, when you're fired from any job, you need to frame it in the best possible light, in a way that you would be, if you were representing a client that was accused of a crime or did something negative, you need to frame it in a way that would make you look very positive instead of negative. So you need to just move forward and apply to a lot of places. You need to talk about what you liked, but often the best thing you can say is there wasn't any work. There was infighting between the different offices. They didn't, whatever. You have to, in a way that doesn't make the firm look bad. So typically the best answer is there's not a lot of work. It was a difficult, I don't know, but something that doesn't necessarily draw a lot of attention to you, because it wasn't difficult. I was working for a partner remotely. Then they preferred to work I don't know. You need to come up with other reasons. Do you admit that you were fired? Preferably not. But you can say you find reasons that support your argument. So partners wanted to do all the work themselves. They didn't want to have associates work on it. They didn't have any local work, enough of it. And so I was working only for remote partners, but then they started giving all their work to people in their office. You have to come up with arguments and things that are strong, that are on your side. But ideally, by the way, if the law firm needs you, so I just want to keep coming back to this. If the law firm needs you, they're going to assume probably that something bad happened. And if something bad happened, if they need you, they're not going to want to make you uncomfortable and ask you about it. They may not. But if they need you, and the balance is such that if you go to work there, they're going to make a lot of money. And why would they turn you away or by making you uncomfortable? That's probably the smartest thing to do. So if the law firm needs you, then they're not going to ask a lot of questions about that. So my strategy, again, I'll come back to Harrison's strategy, is to apply to firms without openings. So apply to firms without openings, because they're not going to ask these questions as much. And if people want to ask it, that's fine. But you come up with a good answer, they're obviously going to think something's off, but they may not want to ask about it. And if they do, just come up with a decent reason that deflects the blame or something in a way that doesn't make the firm look bad. So just come up with arguments. I can't be the one that makes these arguments for you, because I don't know exactly how you would argue it, but you basically need to frame everything in terms of something that makes you look strong and without making them look bad. So just think, what would you do if it was a moot court competition? What would you do with negative facts? What would your capable associate market yourself? Yeah, same thing. This is top advice, Harrison's top advice. So if I've learned anything in my entire career, so 25 plus year career of marketing attorneys and getting tens of thousands of them a job, simplest thing imaginable. The top advice, the most easy to follow, is that no one does because they're afraid of it for whatever reason, is you apply to firms without openings and find as many as you possibly can. That's it. You do that. There's other things like you can review resumes and resume videos that I've done and that sort of thing. But you apply to firms without openings, and then you find as many as you frickin' can, as you possibly can. That's it. That's how you market yourself. No one does that because there's something, I don't know, it's called an article on BCG called The Worst Job Search Advice Ever. And I'm not going to criticize anyone here, but there are a lot of sources of so-called job search information that tell you it's wrong to apply to firms without openings. You should never do that. That's bad. And sometimes the people that are doing that because they're trying to, I don't know, protect themselves, or I don't know. Or for example, if you're a law school and you have 300 students or 500 students in Lansing, Michigan, and half of them want to work in Lansing, do you want 250 students applying to all the law firms in Lansing? If you're a law school, probably not, right? I'm not saying Harvard or Michigan or someone or whatever is going to tell you this, but this is the advice that, because if the law schools, in order to give people jobs, they need to basically
have some control over where people go because they need the best applicants to go to certain firms. They end up relationships with different people. I've watched law schools do this. I have lots of employees that have gone and been like career service or former recruiters at big law schools. And anyways, but the point is that you need to apply to lots of places about openings. I'll just tell you a quick story so you can understand how powerful this is. So I had a candidate that went to a great law school. I don't know what it was. It was some great place, Chicago or whatever, Stanford, something really good, and had done very well there, like one of the top 5 students or something, or 10 students in his class, just freaking off the chart smart. And he was doing the same thing that had the same thing happened that happens to so many people on this call. And he had lost his position at a major law firm and been fired because he had made a stupid mistake and missed a deadline or something. And so he went to all the recruiters he could find in whatever market he was in. I guess it doesn't matter, but it was a market with a lot of recruiters. And everyone told him, no, we don't have any jobs for someone who's 6 months out, or we have this firm, maybe we'll try that. And no one told him to, no recruiter tried to get him to apply to lots of places. They basically said, this is all we have. We've got these 2 jobs or this 1 job, or we don't have anything, but we'll let you do, or we can't work with people that lost their job and all this stuff. Long story short, I got him interviews with like Boyce Schiller, which is impossible to get interviews with. I got him interviews at Quinn. I got him interviews at a bunch of different firms, and it saved his career. If I hadn't done that, he would have had lots and lots of problems. This particular story, by the way, is something that is repeated at BCG with people that aren't getting jobs in other ways on a daily basis when interviews come in, and a monthly basis when lots of people get jobs. It's freaking crazy. Now, we have other ways of helping them because we track the firms that interview certain kinds of people consistently, and we know who they are. And there's 30,000 firms that are in our database, and 10,000 of them are consistently work. So we have a lot of intelligence, but you can do the same freaking thing. So my advice is, it doesn't matter who you are, all you need to do is apply to a lot of places. You would be crazy if you didn't and you were trying to get a job. If you are just have a JD job and not a law firm job, if you apply, this is how crazy this stuff is, if you apply to jobs on Indeed or LinkedIn, that employer is going to have lots of people applying, and most of them are going to have jobs from law firms. Most of them are probably going to have better qualifications than you. Most of them are going to be interviewed from the first people that apply and not later. So why on earth would you possibly want to market yourself that way when you know you're not going to get the job because most of the people that are applying are going to be better than you? You would have to be insane. And that's what everyone does. Oh, I'm not going to apply to places that opens. Oh, that's bottom line. Oh, that's this, that's that. And wow, I've seen so many people stop their careers because of this one piece of advice. And you need to frickin' fix it and apply to places that openings. And if you do, you will get jobs. Now, your resume, by the way, I know you asked for the top piece of advice, but your resume needs to not be all over the place. And you should watch videos that I've done about this and all sorts of stuff, but it needs to be focused on something and allow people to read into it is all. But you don't need to talk about all this stuff that has nothing to do with working in a law firm. You just need to tone it down and just, if possible, just take out your freaking description of your experience. If it's nothing, you just need to fix it. So that's but yeah, apply to places that open. No one does it. Everyone thinks, again, most people don't do it. If I tell my candidates to do it, they're like, oh, Harrison or BCG is trying to spam me. No, I'm trying to get you a freaking job. My God. But again, this is how it works. You have to apply to places that opens. You apply to places that openings. No one else is doing it. You're the only applicant. If the law firm can make money without having to go and interview and spend time and call people in, interview multiple people and just talk to you, it's much easier. And you're not competing with others. You'd have to be frickin' out of your mind to not do that. That's what everyone does. Why would you want to compete with hundreds of people submitting their resume on Indeed or LinkedIn for the same jobs. You can go to Law Crossing and apply for jobs that aren't being advertised, which is also smart. But I'm not trying to promote my services here. You can, or my businesses. I just want you to understand what you need to do to frickin' save your career or start your career. Okay, if you have to take time off to be a caregiver for parents, how do you assure a potential employer you will never again be doing that? Both parents have passed away, and I no longer have any family. Do I tell them that? Yes, you can say, my parents were dying, or and I was the only one that could take care of them. Yes, you can talk about that. Then if they say, why aren't you going back to the same firm? You can say, well, because I want to. I want to explore new opportunities because I have this opportunity to do that. Yes, you can tell employers that this happened and that's it. They should respect you for that. Most of the time they will. But I would say my whole family, all I have now is my job. It's very important to me. But yes, you can bring that up, and that is positive to do. I'm making sure I'm actually doing a good job working through these questions for the most part. Okay, this is a good question, interesting one. So if a lawyer, this is a question, loses their position in February but is paid through March, can they list on their resume that they worked at a law firm until March? Yes, you would be insane. Sorry to keep saying this, but yes, you go all out applying for jobs. When you lose your job, go all out. Apply to firms without openings. I'm going to say it again, without openings, and then ASAP and get a job as fast as possible. And not only that, you get a job as fast as possible. But yes, you list on your resume as long as you can. Not only that, but if the law firm, if you lose your job and the law firm shows you the door, you demand that they leave you on your website, that they leave you on the website. You demand that they keep your voicemail active, email, all this stuff. You demand they keep it active, because if they don't, and I'm going to be really clear here, if the law firm doesn't leave this stuff active, they're screwing you over. Now, I'm not going to say they're screwing you over because they may have legal reasons for doing it, but I would just say does not leave active. Sorry, not leave active. You are screwed, right? And I'm sorry to use such. So yes, you can still get a job, but you want to actually negotiate with a law firm and say, I need this. I'm trying to get a job. And they know that if they don't leave that active, that it's going to be very hard for you to get a job. Your job, if you lose a job, is to do everything in your freaking power to get a new job, because if you don't, then you're going to have that break. But you need to do everything you can to get the law firm to make it look like you still work there. You can say, hey, very early in my career, I've only been here like a year. I'm sorry for the reasons I'm losing my position, but this is really harming me if I don't have the ability to get a position in time, because it's very much more difficult to get a position without a position than with a position. You tell them that. But I want to be very clear with you. Like, you need anybody that loses their job and is on the website for 6 months, for a month or whatever, you need to apply every frickin' place you possibly can to get a job so you don't have a break in your career. So what does that mean? That means once you start practicing law, you're not really supposed to stop. You're just supposed to practice, till you die, pretty much. Till you retire. So any break on your resume, any break in your career is going to hurt you. So you need to make sure that you do everything you can to get a job. That means finding every single firm, every single place you could work, every single city, wherever. That means, where do you apply? You apply to, where did you grow up? You apply there. Did you grow up? Where did you go to school? Where do your siblings live? Where do your siblings live? Where do your siblings live? Where did you go to school? You apply to every single market you possibly can. Did you go to, and if you do that, then you'll be more likely to get positions than if you don't. So that's my piece of advice to you. You need to do whatever you frickin' can to work, to get a job. And these are places where you grew up. The only reason I bring that up is because if you try to get a job where you grew up, then people will think you're going home. They will think you're not trying to get a job there because you're having problems. If you try to apply where your siblings live, that's good because you say, I want to be close to my brother or sister. You want to go back to where you went to school. Those are all things that you can do that can be very helpful in terms of ask you if you're asked those questions. Is another question. Great question. Do you recommend cold emailing firms about wanting to work for them? And what do you assess your post? Yes, you cold email every firm. Better yet, I'm just going to say it. No one's going to like this. Send a letter. Send a letter with your resume, etc. Because hardly anybody. Imagine you're sitting in your desk and someone emails you their resume. Boom. It's just like, all right, I'll look at it. And then it's just there. Maybe you delete it or put it into a folder. You get a letter in the mail. This is what legal authority used to do. You get a letter in the freaking mail. Someone delivers it to you. You open it. It looks okay. You sit it on your desk and you're reminded of it day after day if you don't call, because if it looks halfway decent, most of the time, some of the time you may throw it in the trash, but who often do people send a letter? So this is a friggin' awesome strategy that I recommend. Yes, you cold email firms, but resume and cover letter, but you're better off sending a written letter. But yeah, you cold email firms. At BCG, we certainly email resumes but cover letters with our stationery and with all this stuff. But in addition to emailing resumes, we also send faxes, because who sends faxes these days? A fax comes in, someone walks it over. That's awesome. So you have to get people's attention. The best way is to have something that's printed that arrives on their desk. Do it as many freaking places as you can to all the people. It's pretty easy to find who's in charge of hiring. If it's a law firm and there's 3 names and it's a small to mid-sized market, you just send it to the first name or whatever, the one that, or whoever is listed as a hiring person. So someone asked, this is a while ago, what are the reasons that you warn about branch offices? Okay, so the question is, why are branch offices dangerous for people's careers? And this is a good question, and I'm going to answer it because it's okay. So here's why branch offices are dangerous. So branch offices are dangerous for a lot of reasons. They're not all dangerous. Like, I want to be clear. Like, if you're in a branch office for freaking, what the hell happened here? You're in a branch office for Quinn Emanuel in New York, or Latham and Watkins in New York, or Gibson Dunn, which is in Washington, D.C. You're in one of these branch offices, like, that's freaking awesome. Those are great firms and they're great branch offices. Gibson Dunn in Washington, D.C. is one of their top. It's great. But anyway, so a lot of branch offices are very good. But here's typically what happens in branch offices. Decisions about advancement are made in the main office, right? So made in the main office. So that means it's very difficult to make a partner, right? Sometimes it's less because they want to show that they're promoting people in branch offices, but typically it's difficult to make partner or advanced. Often work comes from the main office. So work comes from the main office. So what a lot of times law firms will do is they will basically want to open a branch office. And so think about this. So the law firm wants to open a branch office. Many times it may send one person or a couple of people from the main office, but then it goes and needs to get local attorneys to join the branch office. So local attorneys, that means attorneys need to be recruited. So when they recruit, local attorneys need to be recruited. And those local attorneys, typically, not always, but they're going to be people that are unhappy in existing firm, happy from a different culture of the firm, so different culture, and often may not have business, even though they say they do. So what does that mean? So unhappy means that if someone's unhappy in one firm and they're recruited to go to another firm, the odds are that they may be unhappy in the new firm. So these partners that go to the branch offices that are recruited are often haven't been happy in the firm that they're recruited from. So that's one thing. They may come into the new firm and also be unhappy. They may be coming from a different culture. So certain firms are very siloed, where partners will all protect their business. Other firms are not siloed, meaning everyone cooperates, a different culture. A lot of times when people are recruited from different firms. They may not have business. So what does that mean? That means that a lot of times when partners are moving firms laterally, they will say, hey, I've got all this business and I can bring this much over and stuff. And then what happens a good portion of the time, not always, but a large portion of the time, is that turns out to be BS. So that turns out to be BS, meaning the business projections turns out to be BS. Projections turns out to be BS, maybe 50% plus of the time. So what does that mean? So that means that these partners join the firm, and these partners are basically in trouble the second they join, right? So then there's often a lot of turnover. So there's a lot of turnover, and then often the partners that were unhappy at new firms, they will move again because they're unhappy, right? So they'll move again because unhappy. So then the second they get there, there's all this issues with being unhappy. Then the cultures won't be compatible. So they will move from one firm with one culture and they'll move to another with a different culture. So that's a big issue. So not compatible. So different people will be that. The partners will feel like second fiddle to the people in the main office. Partners, second fiddle, and they won't have as much. They will feel like less than, right? They'll feel less than. They'll face new conflicts with bringing in business, meaning the law firm may have conflicts about a client. The law firm may not approve a client that they might have been approved at another firm. All of these things are happening. And there's more. I could keep going, but if you recruit a bunch of people, or the bunch of people in a branch office feel like partners feel like they don't have power, that a lot of stuff is coming from, the decisions are coming from the main office, that the culture is different, that the partners feel less than the partners from the main office, and they need to get their approval, that they're not able to bring the type of work they bring in, and that they may not have, their business may not transfer when they're hired, or they may have been not telling the truth about their business. That creates problems too. So all of this stuff ends up creating a situation where there's just a lot of freaking turmoil. Not only that, but then these same partners will be the ones that were recruited from another firm will be vulnerable to leaving for a new firm, right? So they'll be vulnerable to being recruited again. So then you wind up with a situation where a lot of the partners are unhappy, where people are coming, they haven't started at the main office, they don't understand the culture, where they're leaving, where many times because they don't bring enough work over, because they don't have enough work, they have you need to get the work from the main office, which is a non-starter, because the partners in the main office they'll have relationships. The associates will have relationships with those partners. With those relationships, it's easier to make partner. With those relationships, it's easier to get work. When you have people that may not have the work, it's much more difficult. All this stuff really needs to be thought about. Now, again, I'm not saying that every branch office is bad, because there are some, frankly, kick-ass firms that have great branch offices. I'm talking about your Lathams, your Scaddons, your Gibsons, your Quinns. A lot of firms have just these freaking awesome branch offices. Sidley and Austin. There's a lot of firms out there that are freaking great and have good branch offices. Morrison and Forrester's, what an awesome firm. So there's a lot of firms that have great branch offices, but this is the big problem with branch offices, especially with new firms. Think about it. Management is elsewhere, like management elsewhere, just so many things. So branch offices are freaking, they are dangerous. So there's something for some firms you need to be very careful with. Okay, someone said, how do I replay the recording of today's call? So the presentation will be online. I don't know how long it will take, but it will be online. And so that's something you'll be able to see. Okay, this looks like it may be the last question. If anyone doesn't have any more, I will finish with this question. So let's see. I have been job hunting for 3 months and I still have not received any interviews. I have sent emails to partners, applied online, and even reached out to a few common contacts. What can I do to get an interview? My resume has been updated and checked by a law firm partner. So it's the same thing. Fortunately, I'm going to keep coming back to this. Let me just find this here. There's a lot of stuff here. Okay. I'm going to answer this question the same way I've answered this question several times before. And I'm not saying you were not paying attention or anything. I'm just saying that this is my number one piece of advice. If you haven't been able to get an interview, you need to just apply every possible place you can that doesn't have an opening. You need to search online. So what does that mean? You go to Google or whatever, you use different sources. You search for, what would be an example? Let's talk about family law firms. I don't know what you do. Family law firms in Omaha, Nebraska. I don't care where you frickin' are. There's tons of places that you can work. There's so many. Look at this. It's freaking crazy. Google screens, licenses checked. I don't even know what this means, but look, family law, and then you can search all these different locations. You can look here. There's more businesses. You can just keep going. There's so many places an attorney can work. Look at this, just page after page of places, whatever town you want to work in, whatever market, what you can find. There's so many freaking jobs out there. It's ridiculous. Look at this. There's all over. It's just completely insane. Now, this particular firm looks like it's only women, but if you're a woman, that's probably a good place to apply. But again, there's firms just all over. There's so many freaking places you can work. You just have to decide where you want to work and find the firms and Google whatever it is and apply, and you will get hired. It's as simple as that. So if you want to work your contacts, which is fine, send emails to partners, apply online, that's fine. But my advice is to go frickin' all out. You shouldn't be hired in 3 months. Apply to every market you possibly can. Apply to markets where you are, where you grew up, where your siblings live, whatever. And just following this advice will change your life and your career. And no one does it. I don't know why. And again, but it's freaking works. So let me make sure I got everything. Yeah, I think I got all the questions. Congratulations for everyone for staying on this webinar. I know it was a very long webinar, but I think the content was exceptionally important. And I think it should, if you understand all this, it should change the course of your career. Wow. Very impressed with everyone who stayed on this. This stuff, by the way, that I talk about, if you learn it and you follow it, it's made change the lives and careers of lots of people. Not that I have anything special, but if you listen to someone that has a lot of experience like I do, who's been doing this for a long time, obviously I've learned things that some people haven't. I'm very enthusiastic about this business, but listening to this kind of information, learning from me, from other sources is very useful for having a good career. And so I commend you for doing this. Most people that are successful in any undertaking will have people that they listen to and follow, whether it's for self-help or your career or whatever. I used to listen to Tony Robbins, and then I met him and worked with him. I used to listen to my mentor, Chet Holmes, and then I was able to work with him when he wrote a best-selling book, and he was my friend. So listening to people that have stuff to teach is really important. And certainly you can get a lot of information, more than I can give you, when you talk to sometimes partners in law firms and ask them their advice too, or people that have done well in your own firm. So anyway, congratulations for listening to this. I think it should have been I hope it's very helpful. I'm certainly impressed with everyone that's still on this call, because this is a lot to listen to and take in. But if you didn't listen to all this, it's probably going to help, may have changed the course of your career in life, because there's a lot of good information here. And again, the main webinar that I did, not the Q&A, but the main webinar will be on BCG, probably within a week or two. You can listen to it then. And thanks everyone again for being on this webinar. And I hope everyone learned a lot. Bye.